Nothing is more important than understanding your users. But live interviews are slow and time-consuming and leave you with only a handful of data points. Surveys or unmoderated tests, faster, but never deep enough. Meet Outset, the AI-moderated research platform that delivers the scale and speed of a survey with the depth of an interview. Outset conducts in-depth video interviews, usability tests, and interactive sessions with hundreds of participants at once. AI moderates the sessions in real time, dynamically digging deeper to extract valuable insights every time, and in any language. Then, it instantly synthesizes the results, extracting themes, highlighting key insights and video clips, and saving you weeks of analysis. Test concepts, refine designs, and uncover opportunities faster, cheaper, and at larger scale than ever before. Customizable, secure, and enterprise-grade. Outset, the AI-moderated research platform. Get started at outset.ai.
Okay, good morning. How are we doing this morning? Did everybody get coffee? Hands up if you got coffee real quick. Anybody? It's good. Shout out to California Cave. Can we give a round of applause for California Cave? Woo! They are in the Presidio on the weekend, so if you're looking for a top-notch cup of joe and you happen to be in the oddest looking place in the city, you can have some. Cool. Welcome to day 2 of Research Week. We have an amazing program for you. Of course, today we're here for the one and only Great Research Program. More on that in just a minute. Before we get started, can we get the clicker? Do you guys have the clicker over there? Hey, Mike, do you have the clicker? Yeah, it's important. Perfect. Thank you. We have to start the day with a very special thank you. Please, a round of applause for all of our wonderful sponsors, without whom we would not have this wonderful free learning experience. Thank you to all of you for being here and supporting us. When you guys invest in this community, I know this community is going to invest back in you. And in particular, today we have another title sponsor, and their name is Alida. And perhaps my friend over here from their wonderful team can come and tell us what you guys do. Here you go.
Hi everyone, good morning. How are you all feeling today? Love it, love it. Now, my name is Cameron, and I'm here with Alida to welcome you all to another day of great research. Now, great research is a celebration of what brought many of us into the field in the first place. It's about how we tackle tricky questions and overcome prickly problems, and that's through the craft of research and really pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Now, we at Alida absolutely love this theme because we believe that great research isn't just about informing decisions, but it's about driving innovation. And our mission is really to amplify the voices of your users, your subscribers, your fans, even your detractors, and put them at the very heart of research and change. And that all starts with respecting and building upon the craft of research. Now, if you're not familiar with us, definitely come say hi later. We're at the booth right at the back there. We're a research platform that helps organizations bring users into every single decision. And we work with over 600 brands globally, and we give them the tools they need to uncover insights and act with confidence. Our value prop is very, very simple. We help researchers like you take insights and turn them into impact, whether that's through faster feedback loops or smarter segmentation or even embedded research programs. We help you do more with what matters most. So definitely come say hi. We'd love to meet you, get to know a little bit more about what you're working on, and also show you what we're building. We're here at Demo Day, so definitely pop your heads in for that and see what we're doing. If nothing else, it's a great opportunity to stretch your legs, get your steps in for the day, and enter for a chance to win our wonderful pickleball sets, which I hear is quite a hit. So without further ado, enjoy the day, everyone.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Cam. Okay, it's my wonderful privilege to introduce someone very special, someone who I've had the privilege of knowing for Half a decade, which sounds so weird. I'm like, I've been doing this for 5 months. No, it's been a long time. And this individual is somebody that I think many of you have gotten to know as well, have learned from her, have learned with her. Yes, her name is Colette Calenda, one of the best folks for helping with the mentorship and growth of so many people. Most people don't know all the time that she spends in her own personal time, just like taking calls with people, answering questions. And everything that we're going to learn today is just a continuation of that commitment to helping our community grow. So please give a warm welcome to the one and only Colette.
All right, folks, I'm thrilled to be your host today. As you know, great research and IC growth is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart. I've been one of these ICs. I've also helped grow many of these ICs on my teams. And I think truly, ICs, and especially senior staff principal ICs, are the real engines in companies. They're the workhorses. They're the ones who get these strategic projects from definition through to action. And that's really powerful. So I'm excited because oftentimes senior plus ICs are some of the only ones on their teams or in their orgs. And today, we're a room full of this group, so it's a really awesome opportunity to get to know each other, learn from each other, and collaborate together. All right, so why are we here? I truly think that ICs are the secret superpower to every UXR organization. They're the ones who really take these insights to heart. They're the ones who drive action with cross-functional partners. They're the ones who find opportunities for new strategic work that hasn't really even been identified before. These are really core areas of skill that really go unnoticed in a lot of ways and underappreciated at a lot of external events. So I'm excited that we have an entire day here focused on the craft of ICs and the career growth of getting from senior to staff to principal and even beyond. So today's a really unique opportunity to learn together across companies, share insights, and grow together. A couple of rules of the road. I ask all of you to first be present. This is a really special opportunity, and please be present with each other. There are breaks throughout the day, so you can check your devices then, but please stay off of them for the time being. The second bit is every talk will have 10 minutes of Q&A. That's a huge amount of time, and it's really important that we use that time to ask our really amazing speakers all the questions that you're burning. And then lastly, connect with each other. So as I mentioned, ICs are few and far between within companies, but today we have the opportunity to be here all together. So let's make the most of it. Okay, I want to start off with a few themes that came to mind for me, and some of the reasons why I feel so passionate about IC growth in particular. The first is, IC growth is uniquely personal. I'd say going from an associate researcher to a mid-level researcher is a pretty standard path. And even though career ladders exist for the higher levels of IC work, oftentimes it's actually not really those exact skills. It's more about how you implement those in your own unique way that really drive your career growth later on. So in a lot of talks today, they're going to mention their own career paths from what got them from senior to staff to principal. And that talk is really uniquely personal to them. But hopefully some of these insights can help spark ideas for how you drive your own path and your own learnings forward. The second piece is, I think we have a really unique opportunity in IC growth to lean into your curiosity. Pay attention to what lights you up. You don't have to specialize in one way or another in IC growth. You can do that in a really personal way. So a lot of the talks today will really emphasize this idea of staying true to yourself in your own growth and really thinking about what part of research is most energizing and fulfilling to you and having the courage to really drive your own specialty in those ways. And that leads me to this point, which is there is opportunity for, I would say, almost everyone to get through these upper ranks of IC growth, but you have to carve your own path. It's not going to be given to you. It's not going to be prescribed for you. It's something that you have to really define in your own way. And this might actually mean really making a role versus finding a role. And the secret really is to think about what your own UXR superpower is, to define yourself as a senior plus IC and your growth from there. And it's not all about craft. So I've talked a lot about craft so far. That's a core element. I would say that in concentric circles, that's kind of the core component. But impact is a really, really important outer layer, because that's what brings your craft into your cross-functional partners' realm of impact, and what really helps the companies drive forward. Impact here probably doesn't just mean impact with your direct cross-functional stakeholders, so like your individual PMs or your individual design partners. This probably means spanning into upper levels of leadership, so thinking about directors, VPs, et cetera, but also thinking about other orgs, so other product areas, or potentially even other organizations that don't have anything to do with product at all, like sales or marketing. So impact is really, really key at this level, but it might not look the same as impact does in a traditional research role. And lastly, it's really about influence at the end of the day. So it's not just about being able to drive action. It's sometimes about building trust with other people in strong relationships to be able to drive that type of influence forward, so that they not only trust you and trust the insights, but also you guys can make a leap of faith forward together in defining strategy or defining unknowns. So you'll see a lot of these themes throughout today, but without further ado, I'd love to introduce our first speaker. Renato is an amazing senior staff researcher at YouTube, and he's going to talk a lot about how you define your own path in your career growth for maximum impact and maximum fulfillment. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Renato.
Thank you. Is this on? Good. Hello, everyone. I'm Renato Verdugo. I have a deceivingly simple talk for you today. Alec invited me to give this talk about a year ago, almost a year ago, and he said, we're thinking of having an IC day, and we were thinking, say less, you had me at IC. So if you are a senior IC today in the audience, what a gift that the organizers are giving us. Thank you for doing this, for bringing us together. If you're a junior IC, buckle up. You're about to see a lot of different ways of doing what you're trying to do. And if you're a manager, get out of here. No. If you're a manager, thank you for being here, because good IC work depends on good managers that understand that the more senior you are, the more freedom you need, the more space for creativity you need. And we depend on our managers. We inevitably report into someone. And so if you're a manager, I ultra thank you for being here, because you're doing what matters to lead a good team. So when I say I have a deceivingly simple talk for you today, it's because when Alec invited me, I wrote down 4 bullets. That was a year ago. And that's my talk. My talk is really 4 principles for senior IC work. But then the part that I've struggled with is, in a room full of early morning strangers, end of day friends, how do I get people to understand where this is coming from? That matters not only for you to understand what I mean, but also for you to be able to contrast your own experience and, add the necessary grains of salt to the things that I'm about to say. So the preamble to this talk is going to be just telling you who I am and what I do. And then I'm going to give you some IC career path ideas. And then I'm going to give you some warnings about why you shouldn't listen to some of the things that I just said. So I am, as Colette said, a senior staff UX researcher at YouTube. I am the founder and lead of a team called YouTube Research Studios. What we do at Research Studios is we incubate research teams in spaces where we don't necessarily know what the answer or the method or what the research is going to look like. We have Gen AI Lab that focuses on the opportunities that Gen AI is going to bring to the online video space. We have Culture Lab that focuses on the on and off platform experience of historically underrepresented groups. We have Creator Lab, where we're asking the question, how close can we bring creators into our product development process? We have now one creator who's working on the UXR ladder. He's joined our team. We are redefining what it means to co-design with our users. We have Story Lab, which is trying to reinvent the ways that we tell the story of our research. And finally, we have Impossible Lab, where I like using my role at YouTube to try and do things that initially make people think, like, what? No. And so Impossible Lab is that. Unfortunately, most of it is very confidential, but I will just, in very broad brushstrokes, say we partner with external organizations to make some wild ideas a reality. I'll tell you one Impossible Lab project that I'm working on because it's personal. Last year, I went to Tokyo on a research trip, and I came back with the same perception that I have every time I've been to Tokyo, which is, oh, I wish I spoke Japanese. And I was talking to a few people about this, and everyone's like, yeah, well, but it takes 10 years. What are you going to do? And that got me thinking, well, at what point in our lives, because if I was 16, I won't tell you my age, I'm not 16. At what point, if I was 16 and I said, hey, I'm learning Japanese, you'd be like, oh my God, yeah, great, learn Japanese, that's fantastic, it's going to open doors for you. But at some point, you look like me, and people are like, yeah, well, too late, that train has left the station. And so that got me thinking, when does our adult life go from 10-year goals, from 5-year goals, to quarterly planning? And so I'm learning Japanese, and my goal is that at the end of 5 years, I want to be able to listen in on a research session without interpretation. At the end of 10 years, I want to be able to moderate my own session. We're doing that because I think that changes the switch of how we think about our own work. And so we're doing that so that we can tell people on our team, maybe for you it's not going to be Japanese, maybe for you it's going to be a personal goal of running a marathon. Whatever it is that you do, you should not feel like your life is limited just 3 months ahead of you. You still have 10 and more years ahead of you. You should set 10-year goals. So, YouTube Research Studios, the word studio conveys creative space. It conveys a place where an artist would live and spend their days. And then why are our sub-teams called labs? Because we want to take that creative space and add a research question to it, and so connect the two, a studio being a very creative space, a lab being a place for research and science. Together, we get the labs that we have. Now, I've been at YouTube for close to 12 years now, and I think that if I asked a colleague of mine to describe the work, they would say, it's not necessarily what you would normally see as research or UX research. And so my IC mission, if you ask me to define that, is I want to reimagine what storytelling in the research space looks like. And I'm going to show you 3 stages of storytelling that I've developed throughout my career at YouTube. And I had this idea. I had been listening to a lot of This American Life and Radiolab, and I was thinking, why is our research so boring? Why can't our research sound like Radiolab? Why can't our research be as engaging as a colleague and I went to Comic-Con, and we did this whole story. That's me 11 years ago. The hair has grown. And we found this incredible MIT professor who had built this Iron Man costume at night, and we turned it into this whole radio piece that at the time we were researching what it meant to be a fan, and so this felt like a very adequate piece. And to my surprise, people started listening to it, and they really liked it. They were like, cool, is there going to be more? And so that was very early on. It was at a stage in my career where I didn't really have any good reason to be breaking the mold, except that I liked radio and I wanted to do radio storytelling at work. Fast forward a couple of years, and I was trained as a photographer, and I really missed telling stories with photography. And I was thinking, why is it that as UX researchers, we don't use documentary photography? It's such a powerful storytelling tool. And so I started, inspired by Dorothea Lange, one of the great American photographers. I don't know if you knew this, but Dorothea Lange used to work for the Farm Safety Administration. She worked for the government. The photos you know of Dorothea Lange, like Migrant Mother, were taken in the context of a very dry government job. And she used to say, the camera is an instrument that teaches people how to see without a camera. And so I took that idea and brought it to my boss and said, hey, I think that if our role as UX researchers is to show people how to see the humans that use the products that we develop, I think a camera could be a really powerful tool for that. And so we began doing visual storytelling, which we call visual ethnography. Here's a day in the life of a YouTube creator. Her name is Anisha Dixit. She works out of Mumbai, and I've had the opportunity to work with her in a lot of depth over the years, and so here's one day in her life. I'm not going to get into all the specifics because we're just trying to get brushstrokes of the storytelling, but you'll see what I mean. And then we started doing more and more of these because people were asking for more photography projects, and so I started visiting creators at home. I started attending conferences where creators would be. I started attending our marketing events and trying to document as much as I had access to what the creative process of YouTube, of what it means. You know, you go on YouTube, you watch a video, it's hard to imagine everything that happens before that video existed on the platform, and what we're trying to do with visual ethnography is document that process and show it to everyone at the company. There's a really beautiful project that has inspired me to keep doing this. The Smithsonian organization realized at some point that across all of their institutions, all of them had photography collections, but they were photography collections for different reasons. So a science museum might be archiving photography that was used to discover science phenomena. A historical museum might be archiving photography because of its historical value as witness. And an art museum might be collecting photography as fine art. And so they wrote this book. They brought together all of the Smithsonian Institution organizations, and they said, take a look at your photography collections and figure out what the role of photography within the Smithsonian is. And they wrote this book called Photography Changes Everything. It's amazing. Order it right now from your local independent bookstore. Every 2 pages, someone from a different field talks about the role that photography plays in their field. But in the introduction, one of the curators and leads of the project, looking at what everyone else wrote, says, perhaps most profoundly of all, we discovered that photographs give us a reason to tell stories. And that's the power of photography, and that's why photography should, if it doesn't already, have a space and a role in your research practice at your company, no matter where you are working. Since photography, so we did radio, we did photography, and since photography was starting to gain traction, then you have those photos, you can start creating really cool artifacts. And so that's what I would think of like as the third phase of my IC journey, where I started taking some of those images and then turning them into artifacts that people could hold in their hands. So for example, my friend Jackson Bird, he's a content creator on YouTube. I had the opportunity to live with him for a week. And then I was really frustrated because people, when you write a research report, people are like, can you add an executive summary to the front? Because like, I don't want to read. And so I wanted to create a research report where I could just say, if you don't want to read or look at images, then this is not, my colleagues are doing amazing work. You can go look at that. And so this report is a 3,000-word essay that is led by a 200-word essay by my manager at the time. And if you're not willing to read it, then you're gonna miss out on the wonderful Jackson Bird. During the pandemic, we realized that we were going to continue to grow, we were going to continue to hire, and that we were not going to be going back to the office by May 2020, as we were initially saying. And we realized that we were going to hire people were going to join our team, and we weren't going to be there to welcome them, hug them, and say, we're happy you're here. And so I was commissioned to create a box full of artifacts that people would get in the mail, and they would open them, and they would realize that they had joined a team where their creativity, whatever that might be, would be welcome. I've done little toys that people can play with. And once you have those artifacts, you can have them live in the walls in your office. They exist as physical medium. And then you can have someone like Anisha come visit it, and then she can see, oh, this guy was with me for a week, and it was, an invasion of her privacy. She was so generous with her time, and I get to say, thank you for doing that with me. And she gets to see that it was worth participating in this research. And actually, yesterday, I posted on Instagram, I'm going to be speaking at this conference, and she sent me a message and said, oh, good luck at your talk. And I was like, you have no idea. You're part of the talk. And most recently, a couple of weeks ago, Deloitte invited me to a really fancy conference where I got to talk to chief experience officers from massive corporations about the value of AI imagery. And I was thinking, how do I convey that to them? And so I went back to making woodblock prints, which I hadn't done since college. I don't have time to tell you the whole story, but I promise there's a connection. And finally, once for the gaming collective at YouTube, we partnered with a local San Francisco artist, Louise Loops, to make crochet portraits of our participants. So I'm going to stop showing you things, but hopefully with those quick flashes, you get the idea of a little bit of who I am and where the advice that I'm about to give you is coming from. Hopefully you agree. Well, no, not hopefully, because it's not good. But maybe you agree that this work doesn't necessarily fit into what you expect a UXR at a place like Google does. And don't worry, neither do my colleagues. I have two examples for that. One time, I got a calendar invite added to my calendar, and it was one of my colleagues. And she was like, oh my God, I love the research reports you've been sending out. They're so insightful, and I can't stop looking at them. Would you mind telling me, who's your photography vendor? And I was like, you're looking at him, girl. But baked into that question was the idea that it's impossible that a UXR was doing that. You were probably just farming that out to someone, right? You hired someone. So the good news is we partnered, and we ended up doing one of the most beautiful projects I've ever done. It unfortunately involves minors, so I can't show you anything here. Example number two of my colleagues not expecting this to be part of a UXR's job was that I was once talking to someone who had just been hired at YouTube, and they were looking around, meeting with different people, and she asked me, why do you get assigned all the cool projects? And so baked into that was the idea that there's some central force that is saying, hey, we have a cool idea, and we're going to hand it to one lucky winner. And the reality is, no, these are all projects that I've had to come up with and advocate for and try and find the space for those to exist. So hopefully we're now not strangers anymore. Let me give you the 4 tips I have for you, and that's the talk. First, managing is not the only path to influence and leadership, and Colette opened the day with this idea. But I have to admit that I used to not think this way. I used to think managing was the only path to influence and leadership, and actually, if you give me space here to be vulnerable, 3 years ago, I was a manager, and one day I got pulled into a room with the person who at the time was my manager and the person who today is my manager, and they said, we have an idea for you. We don't know how you're going to take it, but we think you should go back to being an IC so that you can help us shape what a senior IC role at YouTube could look like. And I did not take it gracefully. I was like, why are you downgrading? Have you not seen my manager feedback? I'm a really good manager. Because at the time I thought the only way to grow in your career is you manage 2 people, and then 4, and then 5, and then 10, and one day you're the VP of research and you manage the entire organization. But it's really important to highlight that you can have influence and you can be a lead at your company without managing. I lead a really complex team where we have researchers who are full-time assigned to the projects that I work on, yet I don't manage a single one of them. And partnering with their managers, partnering with the people who are in charge of their career development is really important, but I can have that influence and leadership despite the fact that I have an IC role. Number 2, which Colette also teased, don't let the ladder define you. As you grow in your career, the more senior you are, the less likely it is that the job description that you technically work under, you saw my work, I'm under the same ladder as all senior staff UX researchers at Google, but the less likely it is that you can go to that sheet of text and say, that is me. I think it's reasonable when you're a very junior practitioner and you're interviewing for a job, it's reasonable that people will look at the job description and say, you need to check all these boxes. I think that as you get more senior, the secret sauce of what makes you you is very unlikely to be caught in that ladder. And so developing a skill to abstract the ladder and to think how what the ladder says can be fulfilled with the skills that you actually have is really important. Number 3, understand the difference between mentorship and advocacy, and don't expect both from everyone. A mentor is someone who can help you be better at what you do. An advocate doesn't necessarily have to even understand what you do to be able to promote who you are and the impact and value you bring to an organization. And when you're a junior practitioner, I think it's pretty reasonable to expect that your manager knows how to do the things that they're asking you to do, or at the very least know how to guide you through the things that you're asking them to do. As you grow in your IC career, find mentorship, find how to get better at your craft, whatever that might be, wherever you can find it. I've been incredibly lucky that Google has lots of opportunities for mentorship outside of work. So I've taken photography workshops with Magnum photographers that I have no business meeting with, but I've shown up with my photos and they're like, you work at Google? Oh, okay. And they've become amazing mentors for me. But what I do expect from my managers is to be great advocates for the work that I'm doing. And so understanding the difference and understanding what to ask of each person is really important. And finally, a lot of times people will see the work that I do and they'll say, oh, I'm going to write a one-pager and I'm going to pitch it to my boss and then I'm going to ask for $300,000 to do something like what you're doing. And it's like, no. Don't pitch something that you don't even understand what it can be. All the projects I showed you, I had a hunch that they were going to be valuable. I didn't know exactly how they were going to be valuable. And so instead of pitching things, show the things that you think might happen or might be valuable. My first visual ethnography project, I went to the person who was then my manager, and I said, hey, here's something I want to do. And I talked, and they said, you know what? If all you're asking me to approve is for you to take 2 days of work to do this, go do it and show it to me. And then I'll tell you if I see what you see, if I see value, and then we'll keep the conversation going. And that's one of the best things a manager has ever done for me, because that showed me that they trusted me and that I could go out and be creative on my own. Those are the 4 points. However, stop. There's caveat to this advice. The way I prepare for talks is for 6 months, I become really annoying, and every person who wants to talk to me, I'm like, oh, I'm giving a talk. Do you want to hear what I'm talking about? As recently as last Friday, my friend Isha Dandavate, who's also a UXR at Google, I was telling her about this talk, and she was very gracefully listening. And she was like, wait. You need to be careful with this talk, because it's easy to sound successful on stage. And it's easy for the people in the audience to go home thinking, oh, well, he has his ducks in a row, he's managed to do it. But it's a lot harder in real life. I can now take 11 years at YouTube and turn it into like a pretty convincing 20-minute talk, but in reality, it was a lot harder, and Isha's right. And so I want to say a few things. First, not all environments are good for breaking the mold. If what you want to do is break the mold, make sure that you have a place where first you can be safe, where mistakes are not going to be punished. And so make sure that the environment you're in is actually conducive to this, and not all of us have that at work. A lot of it is luck. As I was I can't say enough good things about the last 3 managers I've had. I think it's why I never want to leave this job, because I'm not going to roll that dice again. And so the people you end up working with are not always people you choose. The environment you don't get to change. And so a lot of the people you're going to hear on stage today are successful, but they've also been very lucky. And I would add my name to the top of that list. And careers aren't built in a day. It takes a while. It's difficult. And so not photographed in all of these slides is all the times that I did things that didn't work out. And also, you're going to suck at it first. Ira Glass, who I already said is someone who has inspired and influenced my ideas around my career, in an interview once said this really wonderful thing. He said, everyone who does creative work gets into the creative space because they have good taste. There's something they like. In my case, I was listening to Radiolab, This American Life, etc. And then you start doing the work, and your good taste is better than your skills. And so you can look at your own work and say, oh, this sucks. And that's the point where you just hop up, hope, because you will get there. In the words of Andy Warhol, don't think about making art, just get it done. Let everyone else decide if it's good or bad, whether they love it or hate it. While they're deciding, make even more art. It makes you roll your eyes and think, well, that doesn't apply to me. Let me quote someone closer to our industry, my dear friend, Alan Cooper. He says, the future is in the hands of the hands-on. And guess who those hands-on people are? That is you. That's every IC in this room, in this industry. So get to work, do pilots, don't pitch. Thank you.
We'll do Q&A.
Oh.
Yeah, take a seat. Well, that was amazing. I think you can tell why we decided to have Renato open up the conference today. I think one thing he really demonstrated was that it's about taking your own superpowers, what lights you up, and transforming that into your work to make it even better. So we have about 5 minutes for questions. I have many, but I will save mine. And if anyone in the audience has any questions, we have someone with a mic who will give you a question.
Before we start with the Q&A, there's one question from the remote screen that I would like to highlight. That is, I'm curious, Thea says this, that I'm curious how these tips translate to job seekers. What's the right approach to storytelling that goes beyond the job description?
That's a really good question. Maybe that's another caveat to this. I haven't looked for a job in 12 years, so maybe I'm not the most qualified person to give advice. But I do think that showing when I just helped a friend who was getting hired at a big corporation, not Google, but similar. And she has like a similar approach to research. And I told her, meet with the person who's going to be your manager and hint that this is something you're interested in. And see how they react. If they say, oh, that's interesting, I'd love to hear more, they're not going to say, oh my God, yes, let's throw the ladder out the window, and yes, consider your job a blank canvas and welcome your creativity. They hired you for a reason. They have a need. You're going to have to pay your dues there. But get a sense of how that manager is going to react to things, and if they are going to be open to the kind of creativity you bring to the job, or if they're going to say, no, you know what, that's going to be difficult here, and then make informed decisions. But it's a tough economy, so also take this with a grain of salt, because we've all had to have jobs that we haven't fully enjoyed in the past. So, sorry, terrible answer, but really good question.
Yeah, I think also taking that to heart around like owning your superpowers and really letting that come through in the interview process to really make sure that's what they're looking for. Because I think when you're being hired as a more senior IC, to your point, like it's not just hiring for a checklist. You might actually really need certain skills or really need someone who can drive a certain type of influence. And so really bringing that to light in an interview in an authentically you way, I think is a great way to pressure test whether this role is right for you or not.
Hi, I'm Liz. Thank you for this. This is awesome. I'm always looking for ways to kind of encourage more buy-in, and I can totally see how visual, what'd you call it, visual storytelling, and visual ethnography would be like amazing. My dad actually is a retired professional photographer from before everyone could do it, like before there were even flip phones. And so I learned very early on that I have a good eye for composition, but I suck at photography. do you have any, I imagine I'm not alone in this. Like if you look at my phone, they're all just really bad pictures. Do you have any suggestions or resources on like how to do this kind of visual storytelling if you just are not good at it? Like I've tried and stuck with it and still figured out that it's just not for me. But I want to be able to do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Well, but you took my answer because I was going to say keep doing it. But a few tips. One is the best camera is the camera that you have with you or the camera that you can afford. So don't think that, because those were taken with some fancy I'm not going to say like, this is the camera that I use. Buy it. It's going to be great. Your photography is not going to suck. You have to go through a lot of work to get good photos. The photography community is one of the most welcoming and supportive communities in the world because it's people who care about other humans enough to photograph them, but they also know how hard it is to make it in that space. And so I have yet to walk into a photography workshop where they haven't welcomed me with open arms. And even when I've said like, yeah, I work for the man, they're like, oh, that's interesting. They might not be interested in what it is, but they've always welcomed me. And so I've taken workshops everywhere. I've taken traveling workshops, and whenever I see something that I'm like, that's a cool photography opportunity, I pursue it. And if I have yet to encounter someone who says, you don't belong in this space.
I have a question for you. Do you love it?
It is not my passion.
Well, but
maybe find the storytelling method that is.
Don't necessarily take them from this, that photography is the tool for you. There might be something. I'm not a particularly good writer. That essay that I showed you there, I got the help of like every UX writer in the building, and that was awesome. And so the medium is not what the message, that's not a reference to McLuhan, but the medium is not the specific thing that I'm telling you about. What I am saying is there are secret sauces that are not on the ladder that you bring to work, and whatever those might be, don't be afraid to tell your manager, hey, I'm going to explore it, I'm going to play with this.
Awesome. That's all the time we have for questions, but feel free to talk to Renato after this. Huge round of applause for an amazing
talk. Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right, folks, I'm very excited to welcome our next speaker to the stage. This is Chris. Chris is a principal UX researcher at Microsoft AI, and he's here to talk to you about stubborn curiosity, letting your intuition guide your career journey. So without further ado, here's Chris.
Thank you. Hey, I'm glad I didn't I almost wore that shirt, and that was pictures from like 10 years ago, so I still have the shirt. Okay, so what does this mean, curiosity? It's probably not a new theme, actually. It seems like it's coming up a little bit, so I want to unpack a little bit. I have some frameworks to get into, the stories. Okay. Okay, so first, show of hands. How many of you are here because you want to get better at your job? Like, probably everybody, right? Okay, haha, funny. But do you want to get better at your current job, or do you want to get closer to your ideal job? Because your current job is defined by, your company. Like, they have certain things they want you to do. They hired you for a reason, as we just heard. Like, there's certain things, they have a ladder, right? But your ideal job is defined by you. And I want to get particularly into this idea of your ideal job. Maybe this is a little controversial, maybe not, I don't know. But I think that the secret to becoming a super senior IC, UX researcher, principal, staff, senior staff, whatever you call it, is not necessarily learning every method. Maybe you've seen this. This is from Nielsen Norman, right? All these cool methods. These are good to know, not bashing the methods, but I don't think you have to memorize all those. There's a lot of processes. I love diagrams. These are great diagrams. I like the Stanford D-School one, but I don't think you have to know all those things. I don't think that's the secret, learning all the process. I don't think it's a ladder. I think we're all bashing career ladders here. Career ladders are fine, they're fine, but I don't think it's a secret. I memorized the career ladder, now I got a promotion. I actually think that the best way to advance as an IC UX researcher is to follow your curiosity, whatever random direction that takes you. Because curiosity, I think, is the ultimate motivator. For people in this room, I think, we're probably all super curious. That's why we got this job, why we self-selected into this job of being a researcher. And I think because it's this ultimate motivator, it helps you like break through whatever barriers are in your way. Like if you're truly curious about something, you might have like bureaucracy or your job, you'll fight through it. Might be tricky stakeholders, you'll figure out how to deal with them. There might be participants that you can't get to talk, you'll find a way to get them to talk. Like if you're truly curious, you'll figure out a way to solve it. That's why I think curiosity is sort of the main thing to focus on. Curiosity comes in waves. And for me, retrospectively, I didn't know this maybe at the time, but if I look back, I think there's like three sort of distinct waves of my career. The first one, I worked at a bunch of different companies along the way. They don't necessarily coincide with like these waves, but the first one is just do cool research. Like I have a story to tell about how I got into this phase, but that was like for a long time, that's all I wanted to do. I didn't even know where it was going to take me. I was just like, I just want to do cool stuff. Then that sort of transitioned to this research for 0 to 1, starting at Airbnb and through a couple jobs, some startups. Now I'm in this research for AI phase. We'll see where that takes us. I don't know where that dotted line tapers off, but we'll see. Okay, so I want to talk about this whole idea of getting closer to your ideal job that's defined by you. I'll start with a story about curiosity. So my very first job out of college, I have a degree in mechanical engineering. Does anybody else have? I think some other researchers have it. Anybody else? Yes. All right, cool. We should talk. Anyway, so I started as a mechanical engineer at Boston Scientific. This is in Minneapolis. That's where I went to school. That's where I'm from. And it was super boring. I didn't like it. I finagled my way into a different job as a human factors engineer, which is sort of like user experience for medical devices. It's focused on mitigating safety risks. Really interesting. I worked on devices like this. I designed this user interface, the physical user interface here. So I was sort of a UX generalist. It was cool. This thing took like 7 years to get released, which is why I don't work in medical devices anymore. But so it was fun. And I started, because it was like a focus on safety, I did a lot of usability research in labs like this. Classic usability lab. I haven't been in one for a while, but they're fun. But that's like the main research I was doing. And it was fine. This is cool. Way better than mechanical engineering. But this is anybody recognize this from the Nightline video of IDEO? I saw the original broadcast of this. That's how old I am. In this video, if you haven't seen it, they go to IDEO here, and they go to like Whole Foods in Palo Alto, and they study people shopping, and they redesign a shopping cart, and it looked so cool. And this is like in the back of my mind as I was going to these usability labs, doing this usability research, which I thought was pretty cool. I thought, oh man, it would be so cool if I could just one day do this ethnography thing, but I don't know, I probably never will. Whatever, I'm happy, at least I'm not a mechanical engineer. Then one day, the VP of the division I was working in hired an agency to work on this cool new product. Of course, they always hire agencies for the cool work, right? But he's like, oh, the agency had pitched this ethnographic research, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is my chance. I got to glom onto this. So I did. I found my way onto this to just be like a note taker as part of to join the agency as they went off into the field to do this ethnographic research. And the first place we went was northeastern Arkansas, which a lot of famous people are from, weirdly. But anyway, it's me and the main researcher from the agency, a designer from the agency. I'm like the note taker, lowly person. I eventually got promoted to cameraman, which was cool. But this is all I was doing. I was just, I'm just so excited to be here. It doesn't matter where we are, rural Arkansas, cool. And so anyway, we're driving through these small towns, and the very first place we go is this. We're following, it might have been printed MapQuest, I don't know. I don't think it was Google Maps, but we're following the map, going wherever we're going, and we drive through towns like this, and eventually we get to this mobile home, this trailer that's sort of in the middle of nowhere. And I'm like, okay, well, this is my first research. And as we're driving up to this, in the distance, we get closer and closer, I'm like, is this in the middle of nowhere? I'm forming all these stereotypes. I totally admit it. I won't say what the stereotypes are, but it's we were investigating people with heart disease. It was rural Arkansas, a mobile home. You might even have some images that are popping into your mind. It's totally normal. I had all these stereotypes as we're approaching this. So then we knock on the door. This guy answers the door. Looks something like this. This is an AI illustration, and we're like, "Oh, hey, we're here to do the research." And he's like, "Oh, just a minute. Let me go get someone." He gets someone. He comes back, and this other guy, we'll call the guy on the right John. John comes and answers the door, and he's like, oh, hey, I think you guys are here for the interview, right? We're like, yeah. He's like, come on in. So instantly, all the stereotypes I had as we were approaching this trailer just like dissolved. And I was like, oh, shoot. Like, I was totally wrong about every single thing I thought as we were driving up to this trailer in rural Arkansas. We spent about 2 hours talking to John. He told us about his heart disease. He told us about the device that we were investigating. But he really told us about his life, and I was just completely fascinated. He had been living in the local community. He had 2 kids and a wife. He was married. But then he realized later, or came out as gay. He was living, that other guy that we saw was his partner. And the reason why they were living in this mobile home in the middle of nowhere is because they were sort of ostracized from the local community. And this was just like, as he was telling us this, I was like, I love Keanu Reeves. I was like totally just blown away, like, holy cow, this is so cool. I thought it was just gonna be a boring like interview, but like I learned everything about this guy's life. I can't believe it, it's so cool. And then that was like this moment that of curiosity that I call the shock of intrigue. You can imagine this wave. And so that was like this moment where I was like, oh, like my mind was just totally blown. I was just like, every neuron was firing. This is so cool. I was so wrong about everything. And it wasn't like this one moment in time. There was actually this initial interest that had happened a long time ago, the Nightline video of IDEO that had been slowly brewing. But then this like catalyst of this moment where we were in this mobile home in Arkansas, like put it all together and I was like, holy cow, this is what I want to do. This is the type of thing I want to do. That initial interest stuff is easy to miss. Like you're probably interested in a lot of stuff. You never really know what's going to click. But that shock of intrigue is like really hard to miss because it just hits you like a bolt of lightning. Hence the lightning icon. So that was super cool. These shocks of intrigue, I think, are important because these are the moments where like your curiosity, that wave of curiosity, really can take off. I think a couple situations that I have found these shocks of intrigue to occur in are when you do a new method, like in this case, doing ethnographic research for literally the very first interview is where this happened. A new work assignment, maybe you're working on this project or that project, and then you switch. Challenging timelines, somebody asks you to do stuff in like 2 hours when normally you want to do it in 2 weeks. New tech paradigms, AI, whatever. So certain situations that I think we owe it to ourselves to put ourselves into because that's where these shocks of intrigue, these new bursts of curiosity can happen. Okay, so the next part of this wave is what I call the swell of fascination. So you have the shock, and you're like, oh, this is crazy. Then this swell of fascination where you just keep accumulating more and more interest and more curiosity about a given topic. Random scene. So I'm a huge Fall Out Boy fan. Okay, cool. If anybody likes Fall Out Boy, come talk to me. Why am I bringing this up? Because I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I randomly, this is like just a month ago, as I was like procrastinating, making this presentation, I was like, oh shoot, I need something. I listening to a podcast with Patrick Stump, who's the lead singer of Fall Out Boy, and he was talking about his like career. I'm like, oh, this is sort of cool. He was talking about like all the twists and turns in his career, and the host asked him about why he got into music. And he says, growing up, I never really wanted to do music. I couldn't not. I just did. Then he goes on to talk about how when he was, as his career was like, he was trying different things, he would get thrown into these writers' camps, and there was this perspective of like trying to achieve a thing, trying to write a song, in this case for somebody else. And I never really had that, he says, because to me, it was just about the fun of continuing to make music. So there's a lot more to this interview. Maybe it's not obvious from this quote, but as a researcher, I inferred what I think he was talking about. And to me, there's this dichotomy that I think he was touching on, which is like doing versus trying. And doing feels effortless. It feels like flow. It's just like you don't even think about it. You don't even try. You're just doing it. Trying feels like a slog. It feels like, oh, like it's not really working. It's not clicking. It's not taking off. Wrong way. So I could have used this quote from Yoda, but that seems cliche, so I went with this random Patrick Stump reference. But the point is that there's this dichotomy of doing and trying is, I think, really instructive for understanding when you are in this, what the heck? Skipping slides, oh well. When you're in the swell of fascination, I think it feels a lot like doing. It doesn't feel like trying. And so you should pay attention to those moments where it feels effortless and it feels easy. If it feels like a slog and it feels really hard, that feels like trying, and that's probably not a moment that is aligned with your curiosity. The last phase of this wave is what I call the crash of boredom, which usually coincides with some other shock of intrigue, some other thing that captures your attention. Another story here, when I was working at Airbnb, I know a lot of Airbnb people here. I was in this wave of just do cool research. That's all I wanted to do was just doing cool methods. I got to go to China. I was part of the China team doing cool research where we were going into people's homes in China. It was super fun. And I was just like, this is great. I'm doing all this cool research. But after a while, it sort of like, it lost its luster. That wave was starting to peak out. I'm like, this is cool, but I don't know, it's not as interesting as it once was. And there was this moment where we were brainstorming with the China team, ops people, design people, product managers, very cross-functional, about how are we going to win Chinese travelers. And we came up with this idea for a 0-to-1 product, and then did a lot of research around that 0-to-1 product. And that was like a totally new shock of intrigue, where I was like, just starting to get a little bored with this research. But then it was like, ooh, what if we did 0-to-1? What if I did 0-to-1 research? That'd be super cool. And that was like a new wave of my career where I became obsessed with doing research for 0-to-1 projects. I was so curious about it that no matter what I did, it just like drove me to do as much as I possibly could. So that's cool. But what happens when you try something that doesn't align with your curiosity? So far, I've painted these like nice pictures of like I tried this and I tried that and it was all great. But a lot of times it doesn't always work out. So in this like transition, when it went from this just do cool research wave to research for 0-to-1, there was actually a lot of other things that I tried. I ended up in the 0-to-1 wave, but I tried these other things, managing people. I was a people manager for a while. I was a leader of a design team like UX design, UX research, UX writing. I tried these other things, but it's back to this do versus try dichotomy. It never was like clicking. It always felt like work. It was like, oh, this is so hard. It felt like I had to try. It felt like I was forcing it. Like I tried my best. I never want to let people down, but it just didn't click in the way that research clicked. And so maybe an analogy I just thought of this morning is like a puzzle piece. If you're working on a big, complicated puzzle, you might have one piece that you're trying to get. You can't get it forever. You finally find a piece that's like the right color, the right shape, and you try to put it in there and like wiggle it and like force it, and you're like, yeah, I think it fits. That's good. You maybe convince yourself that you found a piece, and then you come back later to the puzzle, and you're like, no, that definitely doesn't fit. You have to be critical enough to realize when you're trying to force something and it doesn't work, you have to like change strategy and be honest with yourself about whether something's working or not working. So to sum things up, curiosity is sort of the ultimate motivator. We are all curious people, and I think if we just focus on curiosity, there's all these other cool things that are relevant, processes, career ladders, all these other frameworks you can apply. Those are all good things, but by focusing on curiosity as the ultimate motivator, you can just break through whatever barriers are in your way and do the work that will fulfill what you're looking for. Curiosity comes in waves that ebb and flow, and it's okay. I think it's really important to recognize when one wave is ending and the next wave is beginning, because if you're stuck on one wave, it'll stop feeling like doing and start feeling like trying, right, where you're starting to force it, and maybe you're like riding it too long. It's important to put yourself in situations, I'm gonna go to this one, where you can find these other shocks of intrigue. So if you feel like work is just getting a little boring, a little old, seek out new situations. It's critically important that you owe it to yourself to do these things. Find new methods, do new work assignments, take on challenging timelines. Maybe it's super short, maybe it's super long. Like instead of doing something in a couple weeks, what if you did it for a couple months? I don't know. Maybe that works, maybe that doesn't work. Whatever it is, change it up, find a new situation, because that will help you put yourself into these moments where you can have these shocks of intrigue. This whole doing versus trying thing, when stuff feels effortless, when it feels like you're just doing it, you're just like in the flow, in this state of flow, that's good. Recognize that, seek those things out, and when it feels like trying, when it feels like a slog, when it feels like you're trying to force the puzzle piece in, that's probably a sign that you should be doing something else. Maybe it's just not working. And you have to be honest with yourself and note to yourself that this is not something I should keep driving. And sometimes it can be tricky. It's not like you might have one hard day at work or a couple days where it's like, oh, this is really hard. It doesn't mean that you're like, it's not always easy. If you're in this doing phase, it's not like, oh, it's totally easy and I don't have to try at all. Actually, you probably are putting more work in these doing moments than in the trying moments. But after like, I don't know, a couple weeks or a couple months, if you sit back and reflect and think, okay, this thing I've been working on, does it feel effortless? Does it feel like I'm doing, or does it feel like I'm trying? Does it feel like a slog? If it feels like a slog, try something different. Put yourself in these other situations, like these, to find other things that might spark your curiosity. Hopefully, by doing all of this, you can not only get better at your current job, which is great, hopefully get promoted, but really, I want you to get closer to your ideal job. And that's it.
Amazing. I think as researchers, we all have such innate curiosity, but it's not often that we apply the curiosity to our own inner selves or our own careers. So I think that was a phenomenal thesis. Thank you for sharing that. Let's open it up for questions.
Hi, I'm Arvin. I really resonated with your message as a researcher, chasing that high of curiosity. I am very curious, though, how do you I think I am subject to maybe what's called shiny object syndrome, where I kind of just keep chasing the next shiny thing because curiosity tells me to keep going after that next high, I guess, of curiosity. I'm curious how you might have dealt with that.
That's good feedback. Or a good question, because I've gotten that feedback. Exactly. People have accused me of that. I don't know. I think the key is to you got to deliver on the things that you are that you have signed up for, right? You can't. It's I'm sort of being a little extreme, but just randomly follow your curiosity. Obviously, you have to do the work that that people are counting you to do, and so that's what I think the way to thread the needle is by delivering and maybe over-delivering on the things that people are counting you on, the things that like sort of the boring stuff, maybe the stuff that you're maybe not super excited about, but then finding new things I don't know, just on your own, initiating new projects or weaving your way or forming relationships with people that will allow you to do those, I don't know, those 4 different situations I mentioned that will help you discover these shocks of intrigue. It's a little bit of it takes a little bit of time. You can't immediately just switch and go from one thing to another. You work on stuff, you deliver, you over-deliver maybe, build good reputations, and then slowly but surely I think you'll find yourself in situations where you'll gain more confidence too about is this just a shiny object that I'm fascinated with today, or is this truly in this wave framework? I had this long slow burn of I was interested in this ethnographic research 7 years ago, and now I finally get to do it. Hopefully it doesn't take that long. But just give yourself time and don't feel like you have to always, I don't know, chase whatever you fascinated you this morning. Maybe, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a really interesting point of the sustain wave as well, where you're probably doing that thing 10 plus times.
Right.
And it's is your excitement and your curiosity building in those times, or is it waning?
Exactly, yeah. And as I was hoping to explain, it doesn't always build. Sometimes you think it is, and you're no, it's not. It's like a puzzle piece that doesn't fit. You just have to acknowledge, you just have to be critical. You owe it to yourself to be critical and be is this really working? And if it's not, change it up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi. Thank you so much for the talk. It was amazing. The number of times I tried to take a photo with my phone and you went to the
Oh, sorry.
So what I wanted to ask you was, how do you deal with the possible guilt of letting something go? Mm-hmm. But having I give you an example, skiing took me 4 years of trying and really hating it for 4 years. Eventually, I'm now enjoying it, right? Yeah. But if I had let it go, then I wouldn't have, now learned skiing. So I'm wondering how, have you come across situations where you're debating, is this one of those times where I have to really push myself, or if I should go with something that my heart is feeling more comfortable with? And where is that boundary for you to know this? It's time to let it go.
That's a good question. I think in the 3 waves I showed, the middle one was 0 to 1 research. It's not as clean as that. It's not oh, now I found this and that's all I do. There were other things that I was doing in there, even at other jobs. And I think the thing is for example, one of the jobs I had was at a startup. It was a climate tech startup, and I was doing I was building strategy decks, which was cool. I really liked it. And it's oh man, I'm really having influence. But I realized I was missing like the fun of research. Like I felt like a lacking or whatever. So I think that's, it's like a good way to study whether people really like something is how much they miss it. And so I think the same applies. Like in the skiing example, maybe if you had, I don't know, not skied for a year, you would have been like, oh, I actually sort of miss it. It was really hard, but I miss being on the mountain or whatever it is. Like, so I think that's like a thing to look for, like try new things. And if you find yourself like missing the thing, that's probably a good signal that maybe you actually do like it, even if it's hard. And I think it's not like just because you want to do it or just because you're curious doesn't mean that it's not hard. A lot of times it is hard. Maybe it's the challenge that draws you in. Maybe you really wanted to conquer skiing. I don't know, but like, yeah, hopefully that helps.
Hi, my name is Carrie. Thank you so much for your talk. Super interesting. You mentioned ethnography and user interviews, in-person user interviews in your talk a lot. That's a form of research I love. But you also talked about having your new phase is kind of AI.
Yeah.
And curious on your thoughts on how those two things can intersect. I know we have some tools here today with AI, moderated sessions, and just curious on your thoughts on how those two things, if they can be valuable together, or?
So, I mean, I think so. Like, I love AI moderated interviews. I'm going to be on the boat party with Outset. I want to learn more about Listen. No, I'm not endorsing anybody, but I think AI moderated interviews are. I think there's so much value to be. I think they can be really, really valuable. I think they're great at collecting stories, but I think they work best when paired with some sort of like old-fashioned, whatever, human method, whether it's just like remote interviews or, oh, I wish I could do more ethnographic stuff. It would be amazing to pair that with some AI moderated stuff. Because what AI moderated is great at is if you, once you've done a couple interviews, you sort of know the contours, you can probably predict how a lot of interviews are going to go. And once you know that, then you can just put it into the AI moderated thing, generate a bunch of stories, 10, 20, 100, whatever it is, and it can be really great for that, because then you discover things that, if you talk to 100 people, you're probably going to learn more than if you talk to 10. There's diminishing returns, but still there's a lot to be learned. So I think AI moderated is great for like scaling stuff, but I think it's really hard, it's really hard to feel passionate about something that you only research through like AI stuff. I have found that if you have even just a couple conversations, there's like this connection you have with the material that makes the AI stuff that you end up doing that much more meaningful. Happy to talk more too, but yeah.
Hi, I'm Sabrina. Really enjoyed this talk. I love a good reflection moment, and I realized I need to reflect. It's coming up. So do you have any practical tips on any good exercises I can do? Because you created such a clear framework, but I know it probably didn't come out so clear at the start. So how do you make all of the messy reflection into something concrete?
Oh man, I wish I had a good tip. Like, for me, it's like think a lot. I don't know, just like think about it. I'm not a very like procedural person, so I don't have like a good like, oh, do this thing, use this Figma thing, and it'll all work. I guess my advice would just be to like give yourself, maybe intentionally think about it. Like sometimes you just can't help but think, you just randomly daydream about something. But if you set aside time to ask yourself some honest questions, like, am I really, hopefully this framework's a little helpful, like, does it feel like doing, does it feel like trying, or does it feel like a slog, does it feel like I'm trying to force something? I think asking, just making, 30 minutes to whatever, sit down and think it out. You could use AI, I don't know, and have a chat with ChatGPT or whatever about these questions, but I think it really, it's just, for me, it has always come from thinking about things, and also it doesn't have to happen in like, if you give yourself 30 minutes, it's like, you don't have to conclude within 30 minutes. It's just, over time, you want to have some, and you have to be honest with yourself, too. I think that's the main thing, is like, sometimes we want something so bad, we try to force it, and then, I don't know, it's like, at some point, you just wake up and you're like, I don't know, it just, the clarity comes. So, the more time you think, the better.
I can volunteer a quick framework. So, one of the things I like to do with a lot of folks I help to define their own career superpowers is I have them go through every day of the week, look at their calendars and all the things that they did, and reflect on, did this thing basically give me energy? Did it put me in a flow state? Or did it kind of like, was I like gritting my teeth and bearing it? And then was that like a positive thing or a negative thing? And if you go through your whole calendar, or your calendar is just kind of a handy reminder of all those things, it becomes pretty clear what things you truly love doing and truly like excite your curiosity, truly like give you that flow state, and the things that you're like, man, if I could outsource this to someone else, I would. And that becomes a really nice, like, reflective moment to say, for me, the things that light me up are X, Y, and Z, and the things that are like, they're part of my job, but like, I do what I can for them. And how do you kind of build more of the things that light you up within your day? I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions.
Thanks. Hey, my name's Maria. I love this talk because, like you, and I'm sure so many of us here, I'm largely driven by my curiosity. One of the things I wanted to explore a little bit further was, given the state of the job market right now, which we all know is terrible, lots of folks are not going to be kind of pivoting to new places of employ. Right. So I'm curious if you had a story to tell about how you followed your curiosity while staying put. So was there a way that you built relationships or kind of tapped into resources in your environment where you were to be able to feed that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, actually, the very first place I worked, maybe is a good example, because I was in this job as a mechanical engineer, and I noticed that there was like this job posting for this other thing that I wanted, and I just emailed the guy, the hiring manager. I somehow figured out who that was, and I emailed them, and I'm like, hey, do you want to meet? Because I had the ability to do that. Like, it felt like an edge versus like a external employee. So I think it's like, I don't know, just setting up these. I think a lot of people like to talk about what they do. So like whether it's internal, even if it's external, like if you see someone doing something that you think is interesting, like you should probably just reach out. Like I'm sure most people will just be like, yeah, sure. I mean, I used to do that before so quick diversion, I worked in medical devices for a long time. I actually worked in Denmark for Novo Nordisk, which was super cool, but I really wanted to be here in Silicon Valley doing like internet stuff. And it was really hard to make that change. But I just like would go on LinkedIn and like find people and be like, hey, I'm coming here, because I sometimes would come here for work. I'm like, can I meet up with you? And a lot of people don't answer, but some people do, and you get to meet up with them. And maybe that leads directly to a job, or maybe it doesn't. But like, whether it's internally or externally, I guess, like, and you never know what you're going to find out through these conversations. Maybe you'll have one of these shocks of intrigue or whatever, right? Maybe you'll learn something that you didn't even know was a thing, and that gives you, I don't know, maybe it's just like a wave you ride for like a year or something as you look for something better. But I guess that's my advice.
Yeah, and also can you think about like other projects or other things within your own day-to-day work that will give you some area of interest, whether that's changing up the storytelling like Renato was saying, whether that's picking a different method like what you described, or even just like doing research for a different team or something like that. Like, can you impact how sales and marketing work with each other versus your product team that you're assigned to, stuff like that. So I think even within your own role, we as researchers actually can find a lot more impact and a lot more ways to express ourselves than it might meet the eye. Awesome. Okay. Well, with that, huge thank you to Chris. This was a really energizing talk. All right, so I'm very excited to introduce our next speaker. Breton's going to join us on the stage talking about adapting to leadership and organizational changes in scalable startups. So the first 2 talks were all about operating in larger companies, but I'm really excited for Breton's talk because he's going to mix it up, talking a little bit about his experience in startups.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. Where's the button? Okay. Thanks so much for being here. It's so lovely. I feel like I've never been in a room full of researchers before, so partially that's very exciting to me. But the other thing that's interesting is hearing the first 2 talks from researchers at large organizations makes me realize how different the world that I live in is. I keep going to late stage startups. I can't stop, won't stop. But that world just looks so different. And so I think this is a talk about that. Not only that is I'm surrounded by a network of researchers who don't have jobs, who are laid off, who are trying to figure out how to work in it. So I hate to be not a downer, maybe a punch in the gut, but my talk is really kind of about that. So here's how I want to use our time today. Basically, we're going to talk through a series of moments. These are mine. It's a very weird thing to tell personal stories up here, but that's what we're going to do. They're real, messy stories where my role as a researcher has had to shift in response to the organization around me again and again and again and again. And each moment kind of builds up to a case, which I want to make. And then by the end, I want to think about, it kind of helps me to think about a different kind of understanding, one that thinks about complexity as chaos, not as like some interruption to the work we're doing, but the actual work. And so I think this is the talk that I wish I had been given when I started out many, many moons ago. So just to give you some sense, this isn't a checklist. I'm not going to give you a best practice list. This isn't a TED Talk. It's really a way to think about research that accepts uncertainty and movement as constants and asks, like, how do you stay relevant knowing that that is the constant? So just some context here. I work at a company called LaunchDarkly. LaunchDarkly is a developer tool. We do feature management for large organizations. I've been there for 2.5 years. In that time, there have been 5 different leaders that I've worked for. So I worked for the co-founder when I started, an SVP of UX, who then became the SVP of UX and product. And then I reported in to a chief product officer who became a chief product and technology officer, just to give you a sense. And with each of these leaders, my role has shifted. I've been a 0-to-1 discovery partner. I've been a strategic sounding board. I've been a research ops generalist. And then I've also been an internal consultant for whatever was most anxiety producing for the board or the organization at the time. But I often joke that, when I was hired at LaunchDarkly, I've done every job but the one I was hired for. And I guess it's not really a joke. It feels like to me now that's what being a senior IC is. And I actually don't think it's bad. I keep coming back to it, but I wish that we talked about it a bit more. And I think LaunchDarkly here isn't some random player, right? LaunchDarkly is a late stage startup at hypergrowth. It is dealing with, the org-wide pivots, the leadership changes, the constant search for product market fit that is so foundational to an organization at this stage. And then I think organizational pressure is not just, some occasional wave. It's the constant undertow, pressing for value, for efficiency, for every corner of the business. But before this, I was in academia. Right? I finished a PhD and then worked for some time at the business school. When I decided to go back into the tech world many moons ago, it was at the metaphorical eve of the pandemic, right? So then the world that I walked into was moving fast, but it was such a different world. Research organizations were scaling. I was never a research team of one. Headcount was the strategy. Growth was the outcome, right? And so, but within a year that I joined, another large late-stage startup, everything changed. We had hiring freezes, we had layoffs, we had tool contraction, and some entire functions collapsed. But in this chaos, research, not just at my organization then, but many other organizations, was often the first to be questioned. It was the first to be reassigned, to contract. So the real question for me in that moment was, how do I make sure that my work stays relevant if the org underneath me is shifting again and again and again? And I think for here, it's that great research, great craft is necessary, but it's not sufficient. I think this is just to iterate on the theme of that. Research craft is necessary, but not sufficient. The work really only matters if it fits the moment that we're in. The organization, the power dynamics, the appetite, the urgency, the politics. And I don't know, I just don't think that's a flaw in the system. That is the system, at least that I'm working in. And I think we don't want to talk about that as much. But for me, that is the system. And if we want to thrive as IC researchers, I'm still here, I'm still moving, I'm still going. I actually still really enjoy my work. And especially for those of us who decide we don't want to be managers, I tried it, didn't like it, who don't maybe have large-scale budgets, who don't control the strategy, we have to know how to operate inside of that system without being flattened or destroyed by it. So I think this is where we're going to go. So let's start with maybe where it all begins, which is how we define ourselves as UX researchers. Because the way that I was taught who UX researchers are, we are unbiased, we're stable, we're clear, we're method-driven problem solvers. But I think that idea of who I thought I should be was often at odds with the organization with which I worked in. So the first shift for me here was thinking about adaptability as being being the constant, instead of me trying to be like, I am a UX researcher, so I am above the fray. I am unbiased, I am method-driven. I have to be like, to be in this organization, maybe that kind of thinking about myself isn't functional. So over the course of my career, I've held many titles, and as I'm sure you all have, I'm in, yet again, another title change. Right now, I'm a principal product researcher, but probably soon changing yet again. But I've been a product researcher. I've been a UX researcher. I've been a strategic researcher. I was even for a bit a UX lead. For a long time, I really thought that was like a kind of instability. That was like, I was like, oh, I just haven't found my passion yet. I just need to find like my curiosity, so I'll like land. And then I could clarify who I was as a researcher. But over time, I actually think about it very differently now, that my role wasn't changing randomly. It was always changing in response to what that organization needed in that moment, right? So sometimes it was doing something as basic as usability testing. Sometimes it was doing statistical segmentation. Sometimes it's doing vision, product 0 to 1 work, or internal strategy framing. That kind of role drift, for me, I guess, is the new norm now. Yeah, so I mean, I'm a historian of technology, so sorry for this, that we're gonna do a little bit of history here, because that's how I like to contextualize it. But even like the term UX researcher, right? How old is that term? Yeah, like, so within the past, like it's no bigger than 2 decades old, right? Like before this, that as a job didn't even exist. You know, before that, you were a usability engineer, maybe you were a human factors specialist, an HCI researcher. We've been also stitched together from a variety of different disciplines. I think Chris said an engineering background. You know, I'm a historian of technology, but we come from cognitive psych, from art, from ethnographers, behavioral science, product strategy, kind of all. And we've all ended up and been embedded in companies where they thought it was useful at the time. You know, some people have gone to design, some people to product, some people to data, to marketing, to innovation. So if you feel like your role keeps changing, I actually don't think that's a failure. I think that means you're experiencing kind of the normal volatility of an organization or industry that's constantly being redefined. So if you're in the tech field in this world, that's kind of the purpose, the meaning. That's what it is. So, but this is a thing we don't often talk about. So sorry, this is like, I feel like I'm having such like a dad moment now. You know, this isn't just about like org structures changing or leadership visions. I think this is economic. This is an economic structure that we are a part of, and I think understanding and being mindful and privy to it helps us operate within it, right? When capital is cheap, companies are rewarded for growth, not profitability. I came into the world where companies were rewarded for that kind of growth. So of course we had 20 researchers. Like that was part of the strategy. Headcount was that strategy. And researchers were brought in early, and often we got to go very broad, very deep. But then things can change quite quickly, right? When, you know, even in the past 3 years, the bar has gone up. Interest rates have spiked. VC funding is dry. This is something my organization is experiencing, maybe yours as well. Efficiency is the mandate, right? And that's not outside of the nature of this organism. That is that is what they're working on right now. And research has to pivot and find value within that. We have to know, like we have to do with less people, fewer times. So now again, I'm a researcher of 1. I've been a researcher of 20, researcher of 1. And you have to find out how to be valuable and useful within each of those systems in the larger structure. And I think what research means in a company depends on what the company needs research to do in that moment. And that might change many different times while you're in an organization. And for some people, that might feel scary or sad. For me, it's kind of exciting. And I think having that context helps you see it. So you don't have to react to it, you can respond to it. You can say like, oh, this isn't happening to me. I can understand the world that we're in. So how do I move to meet this moment? Instead of be very surprised when they say, you know, this discovery exercise we're doing, we're no longer doing it. You can kind of understand, well, like, it's not because they hate research. It's not because they don't think it's valuable. It's because they can't afford it right then. You can't afford that risk. So, like in growth cycles, that might be really big bets, and I love those. They're so fun, but we're not always there. Like, you know, in a pullback, it's really thinking about mitigating risk or thinking about churn or finding that kind of value in the org. So the role here isn't stability, and I do think that's the point. And maybe that's why I keep coming back, because I'm like, actually, that's why I'm not an academic. It wasn't interesting for me, but that kind of stability was just like not exciting. It didn't activate me. But knowing now that like, oh, this chaos isn't something happening to me. It is like the work that we're in. So I don't know. I think for me now, I mean, this is a question that I ask. I have it here too. It's like often I ask like, one, what does the what does the organization think research is right now? Right? That's the first question, which is fine. I think we should all be asking that, and then you can kind of figure out what that is in this moment. And the second part, which I actually feel like is so important, and I've responded very different ways at different times, two, for yourself, like, are you willing to evolve to meet that moment? And it doesn't always have to be yes. This isn't a talk about saying, like, you must do what they want the research function to be at all times. This is, for me, I've looked at an opportunity and said, like, oh, I came in to do this kind of research. At this moment, the org actually needs me to do this other thing. Sometimes I'm like, yes, I will show up to meet this moment, but other times I've said, no, I don't want to do this. And then at least you have the agency there to say, like, this is not for me. This is not what I want. I'm going to do something else. Or you can say, even now, like, in this time, I can meet to evolve this moment and not even be asked to do it, to say, like, oh, actually, I think this is what we need. And in that way, I think this is why I've survived for as long as I have as a senior IC researcher, is that my most consistent contribution hasn't been method. It's been the ability to read a room and know how to respond and know how to like make my work and reposition it for a moment. Yeah, so the ability to reposition and move with the organization isn't something I was ever trained to do, and it's not something we talk about. We don't train on this, but I wish we would. And a lot of time when I talk to growing researchers, we talk about this. Like it took me a very long time and many cycles of churn. It can sound very easy for me up here to talk about it as if like, oh, this is how I've always been. It took many times me pounding my fist, like lots of like putting my hands to my head or like stomping around to be like, oh, like this is something that I need to know how to do if I want to exist here. And I think that's where, like, in startups in particular, change is not a disruption. It is kind of the operating model. I used to think that this change was a disruption, as we talked about, the reorg, the surprise departure, the new leader with a new mandate, but now I really think about it differently. Startups aren't disrupted by change. Startups really are kind of change institutionalized. And I have this like hilarious little framework, which is a bit in jest, but in a way, like I think it's been a really helpful orientation for me here. At LaunchDarkly alone, as I mentioned before, I've worked through, outside of my boss changes, I've worked through 2 major leadership transitions, right? Co-founder steps aside, new CTO, new SVPs of product and engineering, new CPO who became CPTO, and each time, this is really where it hurts. The same work that I've done had to be reintroduced differently, right? The same questions had to be reframed, and I, as a researcher, had to re-earn trust each time. So my trust didn't like bucket over. Like every time the cycle starts, you're basically starting that cycle all over again. And I think that this isn't really just anecdotal, like part of it you can say like, oh, this is just Breton's experience in a startup, but I actually feel like it's very structural. And this is like a thing that trust, it's not like a trust bucket that the former leader that you spent ages being like, this is what it means to do research, when they were like, what does research mean again? And then the next one, they don't pass the jar over. It's like, you have a brand new jar and it's fully empty. And and I think that the history of startups too is this like history of intended and instability, right? Like, again, like coming from the business school, put like a weird business school hat on. But like from a funding standpoint, the model of a venture-backed firm is all about risk and staged risk. You pour in and raise capital, you have this ability to expand rapidly, you shift strategy with that landscape or mood or investor changes, and the cycles of scale, contraction, pivot, they aren't bugs. Like, that's a startup. That's what we're working in. And then, again, if we overlay those macroeconomic cycles, that capital, like cheap capital followed by tight markets, we understand exactly where we are today. Like when capital flows, companies build. When capital contracts, companies restructure. And I think like that is a cycle that we are, or at least me and startups are experiencing. And in both phases, research can stay, but what research is looks so different. And I think in each cycle, it's really interesting to me because I've learned some pieces, I've learned that my previous impact hasn't been erased. So I think, again, in this kind of cycle, each time there is a new leader, I don't get to say like, oh, here's what I did. It's always like, here's how I'm valuable to you right now. And that often looks so different. So the core survival here skill isn't like just surviving some sort of reorg. It's being responsive and not reactive to those changes. So let's start with, assuming that you do great research, fine. But another big moment, early in my tech career, I always thought that like great research would be an end of itself. I'm sure that every person who's been a researcher for any amount of time knows this story. But let's talk. So early when I started my career, I was at a major Canadian fintech firm. I led this like in-depth study, speaking of curiosity and passion. It was on Gen Z banking, and I did like a market scan, and I had like a ton of ethnographic interviews. There was amazing videos and visuals, and I did a competitive analysis, and we nailed this like really clear value-driven wedge opportunity. But I brought it to the C-suite, who was at that point really focused on a completely different strategy, one that, like a product that was very successful in another market in the US. They couldn't hear the nuance of the current proposal. They didn't understand that maybe those markets were different. So of course, what happened, we shipped that US product, but it didn't do well in Canada because the market was so different. Years later, I heard a senior leader describe this new direction. And for me, that new direction was exactly the one I had proposed, but 7 years earlier. And I don't know, like, this isn't a story about bitterness, or this isn't a story to say like, gah! Like, I don't know, like, I just think that it taught me that maybe just like humility should be a part of that, and you have to understand that moment, and in a way that's something that I needed to reflect. Like the right, like being right isn't the same thing as being heard, and having that like right moment is so crucial to having something land. So even excellent research can fail if the org isn't ready to hear that, and that's okay. And it doesn't mean the work was wrong. It means that the timing was off. And so here, I think, let me see, sorry. I think right here, I really had to understand that there is really different ways that I needed to understand to do research, and that I maybe now think about it as different modes of operation that I work within. And this is also in jest, because this is a hilarious framework as well, but we can just go with me. That staying strategically relevant isn't a fixed skill. It's an active, ongoing practice. So depending on the org's appetite, I use like metrics mode, which is like revenue and numbers first. I've also used enablement mode, which scales through democratization, not headcount. I've also pivoted through a broadcast mode. I joke about using like the royal we as if I have a research practice and I get other organizational leaders bought in to use the research in its own way to patch it. And one weird mode that I didn't used to use is called cache mode, which is that we used to think that like research has to be, as soon as you do it, you deliver it. But actually now, knowing what I know, there are certain things where I'm like, this is an incredible insight, but if I share this now and it's not the right moment, it's actually not going to land, and then we're going to lose it. So I often cache it away for when the moment is just right, which is like I wouldn't have thought that that's something that I used, but I actually use it quite a bit now. And so at Launch Darkly, this matters because I think it's not a default research-friendly environment. I've had to earn trust with every single insight I deliver. I've also had to train engineers, for example, to do their own discovery. I've built internal champions on the revenue side. And I also talk about research kind of as a system and not like a service. So there's like, in this way, there's no such thing as like being strategic once and for all. I wish there were. I wish I could say like, well, this is my 5-point list on how you're strategic. Every new leader, every new priority resets the field that we're working within. And what matters is judgment, when to push, when to frame, when to hold back, when to trust your instincts. And I think this is the one that took me like a long time to discover, when to trust your instincts, even if the organization isn't caught yet. So staying relevant means kind of being responsive, not reactive, responsive. And I think this is a distinction that I wish that we talked a little bit more about. So maybe I'll end with this. I used to think impact here, because I think impact is so important, to go back to Colette's opening here, came from delivering this perfect research. As soon as I did a perfect craft, I delivered this perfect kind of research. Now I really understand that it comes from being in the right room with the right framing at the right time. And I think part of this too, even though it's so weird even to be up on the stage, because I used to hide my strongest opinions. I used to couch them kind of behind neutral language or like frame them opportunistically. And now like I try to make sure to speak them in the world, and like constructively and courageously, so that that's part of what earns trust. Not only to deliver that research, but to make sure they know who you are and what you stand for, that you can be flexible and adaptable, but you have a point of view. So again, to get back to this idea that I thought of research as being unbiased, just tell the data, like part of that is having a point of view and showing up, but not being rigid within that. And so I used to think the role would get more stable as I got more senior. I'm now principal. I see that's like looking, I don't even know where to look. I can't look up, I'm looking out. Like I thought that I was gonna get more stable, but it's actually gotten so much less. Like the mess just scaled with me. Instead of like one silo of mess, I now have all the mess. And so this is advice to you if you're on the job market or if you're just like an IC, and advice that I wish that I had when I was starting out too. Like I just feel like don't aim for permanence. Like don't imagine that once you land that job or when you get that title, things are then you're done, because that's not the work. The second is aim for a kind of like pattern recognition. The more that you can understand how the system operates, the better you'll be able to react within it. And watch how power moves, right? So this is like the little, like understand how power flows, especially because it's so transient. And new leaders mean new opportunities as well as new risks. And so use that to your advantage. And then stay close to the real decision makers, and you have to constantly figure out who they are because you don't always know. And never assume that what makes you valuable right now or even this year will make you valuable next, right? Being great at research, again, matters, but your ability to adapt, to keep learning, to keep aligning, keep showing up even when the org resets, it's what will keep you in the room. So I think this is the talk that I really wish I had gotten when I started out. So take what you want, and I hope you help that you find the way, like what you needed from it. So with that.
Absolutely amazing. I think this applies not only to startup world, but to every organization at this point in time. Change is everywhere, and it's really important that you not only own your craft, but also own your impact. And knowing that that might look different month over month, year over year, day over day, week over week. So let's have time for one question.
Hi, I'm Shola. I noticed that you said you had different job titles, and I'm a behavioral scientist coming from academia as well. And I've had different job titles, but doing UX research in some capacity. Yeah. What would you suggest to job seekers who are relying on recruiters and hiring managers who are looking for a specific role and they are only looking for that job title?
Yeah.
And how that relates to your adaptability?
No, absolutely. I honestly, I think it's a great question, and I don't think we have enough skill, especially knowing that most of the job models are scraped too. I don't think we have enough models now to help. I'll say for me, or the way that I've coached other researchers who are looking for jobs, is that we often will think about title flexibility and adaptability there. So it's you don't want to lie, obviously, but I don't think that for them, it's make sure if it's a certain job title and you don't have it, then try to call it out in one of your first lines of your job responsibilities, or even call it out specifically, maybe in your in your headline, so that you can make sure to speak to it, because I think it's for each of your resume, you have to adapt it for the job you're in, and then you can speak. Say you don't have in title or name, you can actually call that out or articulate why you apply or have the skills for that particular title if they're different. I don't know if that helps, but I just think, I wish that people had more, I don't think we have enough skills or frameworks right now to help for precisely that, but those are the ways I've used it, so.
Thank you.
Yep.
And this is a call out to hiring managers, if you are one. Please look at the resumes yourself. Please look through the resumes yourself. Don't just rely on a recruiter or someone scraping it. All right. Thank you very much, Breton. That was an awesome talk. So this is... All right, so this morning we've basically had 3 talks. We've had a lot of talks talking about internal reflection. How do you really position yourself for your own superpowers? And also external recognition. Where are we? Where is the business? And what does that mean for how we have to have impact within the organization? So we're going to take a 20-minute break. Please be back here at 11, and we'll wrap up with a talk and a panel.
I'm Susie. Respondents simply spend up to 10 minutes chatting with me. What's your biggest financial goal this year?
Saving up to renovate my kitchen.
Thanks for sharing. Why is that so important to you?
The kitchen is the heart of the home, and my family always gathers there.
Welcome to a new era in conversational research.
Introducing Listen, the first AI customer researcher. Listen speaks to thousands of people per week and tells you exactly what they want and why. Here's how it works. I want to find out what marketers think about our website. With this prompt, Listen creates a discussion guide. Listen then taps into our network of millions of users to find the perfect people to interview. Within seconds, Listen starts hundreds of conversations in parallel.
What do you think about this site?
Looks cool.
What's cool about it?
I mean, having an AI that can help you go through the path.
In 1 hour, Listen has done thousands of interviews and turns them into an executive summary, common themes, standout quotes, video highlight reels, and even slides. Iconic brands like Microsoft, Canva, and Chubbies already use Listen to make their most important decisions faster. We've raised $27 million from Sequoia to make every company customer obsessed. Comment Listen and we'll give you access and $1,000 worth of Listen credits.
Thank you. Okay, I think I can make this work. Wow, those are small notes. This will be fine. This feels so amazing. I've had the privilege of being a part of these for 6 years now. I was looking back at photos wistfully from Toronto when we had UXR Conf 2019. So Alec, Maggie, like you guys have really built something enduring, and it's been so fun to be in this room with all of you. So many of you I've gotten to work with or know over the last few years. I'm going to talk about being me as a service, and I'm going to stop clicking the remote accidentally. My story in research actually starts an embarrassingly long time ago. It was the first quarter of my PhD program at Northwestern. I was standing in Alan Clark's kitchen, who you may know, and Lauren Scissors, who some of you also may know, looked at me and she said, "Why are you here?" She didn't mean at the Halloween party. I was definitely invited to that. She also didn't mean at Northwestern. I had gotten in, but she was asking what I was doing at Northwestern. I just finished my master's at the University of Washington in human-centered design and engineering. I'd spent a summer at Microsoft Research, and I thought that the right thing to do to get where I wanted was to go and get a PhD. But I had nothing I wanted to be the world expert in. I had no clear thing that I wanted to go and make a dent in the universe about. I just knew that I enjoyed being around smart people, I enjoyed asking questions, and I enjoyed doing research. And Lauren, to her credit, in many more eloquent words, basically told me this was a terrible way to spend my 20s. And she was right. She highlighted that the things that I was interested in learning and building could also probably be learned outside the academy. And unless I had this burning desire to go and become a world expert in something, then maybe this wasn't a place. Lauren is still a dear friend, and she by no means was trying to kick me out of the program, but she was giving me some advice as a fifth-year student. And she was right. About a year later, almost to the day, I started working at Facebook, and 3 months after that, Lauren joined too. And so in many ways, she was right that I didn't necessarily need to be there. But in giving me this question, why are you here, Lauren gave me this incredible gift that really has framed so many parts of my career. I think it has had an impact on why I was successful at Facebook and Slack, why I was able to step out onto my own and spend time running yet another studio for the last 5 years, getting to work with companies like Figma and Dropbox and OpenAI. And it's the thing that's allowed me to step into my new role at Vercel as Chief of Staff for Product and Engineering. So for the first part of this talk, I kind of want to walk you across this journey, because I want to show you how this question helped me become a better researcher and a better contributor, and also much better in control of my career. Then I'm going to switch gears and talk about how you can use the same question and some similar kind of questions and frameworks to apply to yours. Because I think the thing that I've taken away over the last decade plus of being in this field is that your job description is not what success looks like. That is the bare minimum set of expectations, and it's often someone's projection of what you can do in an organization. But all of us are very talented, special people who are able to do many more things than people know how to ask us for. And so if you start with the question, why are you here, and you ask that of yourself, I think then you will identify many things beyond what is being said or what is asked of you. So I started at Facebook, had the privilege of working with many of the people who have been involved this week,
As a very young, very early career researcher, there was about 30 researchers on the team in a company of 3,000 people. And to be honest, I barely knew what I was doing. You get out of grad school, you do an internship, and you're like, I totally have this. And then it's kind of like going from being a high school senior to a college freshman when you realize you don't. Thankfully, the team at Facebook was fantastic. And amongst the many, many mistakes I made early in my career, they were there to catch me when I was falling and to help me figure things out. And so I think very early on, I realized that my job was not just to run usability studies or interview customers, but to use research as a way to help empower the people I was working with make better decisions and build better products. And I think there were a number of these small switches that helped expand my thinking so that I was able to start going from, I don't really know why I'm here, to maybe I can figure some of these things out. And I think like many of us do when we're early in our career, I started taking on all sorts of extracurriculars. I started writing a monthly research roll-up for our executive team. I got involved in Design Camp, which was the kind of 2-week onboarding that everyone at Facebook went through if you were in the broader design umbrella. And I think when I started those things, they were really things that I felt I needed to do to add on to my core job, to give me validity for being there and ensure that I was contributing in a helpful way. But I think over time, I realized that these were less of side quests and actually things that really helped me understand the organization, at least in the way that I wanted to contribute to it. I was someone who grew up mentoring and tutoring. I taught in college. I was a part of the writing center. And so finding ways to directly connect with people, make them welcome, and help them was something that I cared about deeply in my career. This translated to working with Christina Janzer and Annie Steele to build the rotational research program, which we modeled after Google's APM program. Now it's the Research Associates program, where we brought in 5 people in our first class to basically go through the med school, like learn one, see one, do one model. We took people who were just like me when I started at Facebook, incredibly high potential, people who were really excited to bet on, but probably didn't know why they were here either. And we helped them become full-fledged successful researchers across the community of then 300 researchers at Facebook. And that was a really incredible thing. But towards the end of my 4 years there, I realized that I'd very much become part of the machine. And as someone who grew up in Seattle, I had a lot of friends' parents who'd spent 20 or 30 years at Microsoft. And there's nothing wrong with that. Microsoft is an incredible, enduring business. But I wanted to learn how to do things differently, and I wanted exposure to other companies. And so I found myself asking, why am I here if I want to learn how to do things differently? Thankfully, I had an answer. Christina Janzer, who built the research team at Facebook, had moved to Slack at this point. And so after a few conversations and a lot of interviewing, I ended up joining her and the team over there. And I was 4 years into my career. I'd watched Facebook grow from about 3,500 people to 32,000. I'd watched everything break. Our research practice had changed all the time. I thought I had some idea of what I was doing. But when I got to Slack, I realized that nearly everything was different. First of all, we had a product that people paid for. It was something that was inherently multiplayer. And it wasn't something where we were just capturing value. When I worked on Facebook ads, people wanted to advertise on Facebook because we had access to millions and billions of people on the planet. At Slack, we were trying to convince people that there was a better way of working and then sell them on how to do that. This meant a couple of things. One, our CEO, Stuart Butterfield, was incredibly reverent to our customers. He believed that any change that we made in the product would impact you 10 or hundreds of times a week, and we needed to be really thoughtful about the fact that we were going to disrupt the way that you worked and worked together with other people. It also meant that identifying how we could find companies who were excited about Slack was a team sport. Research inherently became multiplayer. We had people who were prospecting companies. We had sales teams who were going after them and trying to understand how they worked and see if Slack would be a good fit. We had these long sales processes. We would go through adoption and onboarding cycles. And so the work at Slack wasn't just doing research. It was about empowering the organization itself to learn. And so pretty quickly, my role shifted from being an IC researcher on the platform team to having Christina let me build the research ops function. And so my job shifted from actually doing that work to making sure that everyone on the research and data science team at Slack had what they needed, and everyone at Slack who did anything that looked like research or data science was well supported. I rolled out Qualtrics to our customer success team, who was already sending dozens of surveys, hundreds of surveys at this point out, using different question language, different answer scores, different platforms, maybe not security compliant. It is what it is. But in the months after we rolled that out, our customer success team very quickly started overtaking us, who sent out the quarterly tracking surveys in total volume, which was awesome. We also did things like office hours for product managers and product marketing who wanted to go talk to customers. We helped onboard tools for the design team and a whole bunch of other things to just make research a better practice at Slack. And I think what was incredible there was I went from the shift of, okay,
my job at Facebook was to kind of do the work and some of these extracurriculars. And then at Slack, I realized that there was so much more to empowering and facilitating an organization so that we could all work together. But as I got to the end of my time at Slack, again, I started asking myself, why are you here? Especially because I had liked a lot of that work of building and structuring and making systems, but I really didn't want Christina's job. It wasn't mine to take. Christina's fucking incredible. But I just didn't want to go into management at the time. And I think by the virtue of the fact that I've been in San Francisco about 8 years at this point, I had tons of friends who were founders or early stage product people, and they were always coming to me with these research questions. Hey, I'm gonna go talk to a customer. Do you have some advice? Or we sent the survey out and no one answered it. Like, what do we do? And I think this really led me to the conviction that research is so much more valuable at an earlier stage than we hire for it, but we just don't know how to do that. And so in the beginning of the pandemic, doing the absolutely most responsible thing I could, I walked away from my job at Slack and I went solo. And I think in some ways this was kind of perfect timing. I had been thinking about leaving, and so I knew that 2020 was going to be a difficult year, which ended up being quite an understatement. But what was great about this was I felt like at this point I was in a world where I was finding people I was really excited to work with. And instead of me knowing or not knowing why I was here, we would negotiate that for every project. I had the chance to work with Figma really early on as they were trying to figure out how do you take this inherently multiplayer research practice across sales and customer support and customer success and the research team and actually make it a more holistic motion. And that kind of journey over the next 5 years continued to change. And what was really wonderful about that was it started with, I'm going to do research for people, or I'm going to help them do research, to I'm going to do research in service of a thing, to we need the thing so you can help with research, to hey, we just need your help. And towards the end of my time running the studio, a lot of my work looked a lot more like kind of dark arts. And just I would show up and I would be helpful. And this ended up being something that I baked into my model, where the kind of refrain for me was everyone gets one free meeting. I would get on a call with people, I would hear what they were interested in, and one of three things would happen. I was a bad fit, and I would try to refer them somewhere else. I answered their question, and they were off to the races. Or I gave them the breadcrumbs to start working on things, and they wanted to talk again. And a lot of times, the people who wanted to talk to me again would come back, and we'd end up working together for weeks or months on their problem. And what was great about this was that over time, and I realize this is small, so some of you may want to turn around. I'm a consultant, or was a consultant, so I have to have a 2x2 somewhere in here. I was trying to explain this work to other people because I had a lot of friends who were really talented as well and wanted to get into this. The internet is terrible here, but if you Google my name and me as a service, this will also show up in the blog post. I realized that I could basically break my work into these two dimensions, whether I was being evaluated on deliverables or not, and whether I was working in service of individuals or organizations. And for me, this wasn't even anything I ever externalized to the people I worked with, but it gave me a sense of the different ways that I could show up with the organizations that I worked with. And as I did this, I realized this wasn't just about the work that I was doing with yet another studio, but in fact, something that had been a part of my journey all along. I put together training when I was at Facebook, and probably too junior to actually be doing this. I was coaching interns, typically to drop out of school and join Facebook. I was often advising people, and then for a lot of people who leave a company and start going solo, they go through this progression of contracting to consulting to fractional leadership. And so for me, this was a really helpful way of saying, I have a broad set of skills that I'm going to bring to the work that I'm doing. But I don't necessarily need to pre-negotiate that with anyone. This is more for me to think about how do I want to show up, what is needed of me in a situation, and really go back to that question of why am I here? Is it that someone needs me to help them accomplish a thing? Do they want me to go on a journey with them, even if I've never been on that before? Or am I here to lead and guide the work of an organization? And as I mentioned, towards the end of my time running the studio, my work continued to look quite amorphous, and often I would just get a phone call that says, hey, so-and-so said we should talk, I have a problem. And I loved that. And earlier this year, that was exactly what happened. I was catching up with a friend over lunch. I was telling him about some of the work that I'd done with Mozilla and OpenAI last year that I loved. And I said the two biggest things that were frustrating to me was that I didn't have more time and I wasn't a full-time employee. I kept running into organizational boundaries as an outsider, and I wasn't able to do the work to its fullest extent. But I really loved tackling mess. I liked complexity. I liked being in a high-trust, high-autonomy environment. And he was like, great, I have one of those for you. So I can say I'm about 90 days in right now, and everyone at Vercel thinks I'm there for a very different reason. And they're more or less right. Chief of staff roles are these kind of catch-all umbrellas of things that basically mean you're here to fix shit. And in my world, that kind of looks like 3 very different things. I run a team called Ship Ops, which is very similar to like product operations, biz ops, research ops, kind of all rolled in one. We talk about being the F1 team that lets everyone at Vercel feel like an F1 driver, so you can focus on the thing that you're uniquely good at, and we take care of the rest, the coordination, the communication, all of the kind of infrastructure to make that work. A third of my world is the typical chief of staff stuff, providing leverage and unburdening the CPO and CTO, taking care of the things that need to be done by the CPO office, but maybe not the CPO himself. And then a third of my work is these like special projects, dark arts, things that just like need an owner that are not owned elsewhere. And what's been great about that is I love it. I get to lean into all of it. And again, for each of those projects, I can ask myself, why am I here? What is the highest leverage way that I can contribute to the thing that is going on? Instead of saying I play this role or I wear this hat and I have to behave in this way, I'm able to just start with, I have this set of skills that may or may not be visible to someone else, and I'm going to do the best I can to move this forward. So I imagine many of you are familiar with Stuart Brand's pace layers diagram. It's very helpful in all sorts of ways. I've remade this in a bunch of different ways, one of which he actually commented on and had some good feedback on, so hopefully he doesn't think I bastardized this one. But when I think about your organizational, so really quickly, pace layers are sort of like the layers of change in nature. They go from slowest to fastest, nature being the slowest, fashion being the fastest. I think about this very similarly for the context that we work in. If you're in an organization, that organization has a mission. It exists for a reason. It wants to change something in the world. That organization then has a strategy or strategies to make that change possible. That strategy is broken up into different functions which help achieve those things. Those functions are made up of teams that have roles that complete activities. Now, the problem is that a lot of people focus, I did this as a researcher, and I see this with a lot of people that I mentor, you stay at the top layer. You focus on the activity yourself. You're saying, how can I do good interviews? Instead of saying, why does my company exist? What are we trying to make possible? How can I show up in a way that is helpful to this organization, not because of what's asked of me, but because of who I am? And I think that if you start from the bottom and work your way up, you probably end up with a very different job description. This is probably unsurprising from someone who gave a talk 5 years ago called You Are Not Your Research Report. But I think that all of us have an incredible amount of skills that live under the surface, that are below the things that people see or know how to ask for. And that it's on all of us to start here at the bottom and say, I work in an organization or a context that exists for a reason. We're trying to make some sort of change in the world. And we believe that the best way to do that is this strategy. We have some configuration of people around us. And if you start there and ask, who can I play with and how can I be helpful, you probably end up with a job that looks 50% different than the one you're doing right now, more or less. So I know I'm way over time, but I want to leave you again with this, because I know many of you in this room. I am highly confident that all of you are capable of doing all of these things. And I think if you start asking yourself in the context that you are working in, why am I here? Or you ask, why are you here? You probably end up with some fun menu of these things that looks different than the work that you're doing today. And I'm willing to bet that you're also probably going to be a little bit more happy, a little bit more fulfilled, and a little bit more excited about that work. Thank you. Do I sit here?
Amazing. I think it's such a powerful question. And we are highly trained researchers who ask questions all the time. And sometimes I don't think we challenge ourselves to ask ourselves the right questions. So thank you for putting that in all of our heads.
Yeah, you're welcome.
We have some time for some questions. Let's see if anyone in the room has any questions to start.
Hi, thank you so much for this talk. It's great. Thank you all for just speaking. My question would be, how have you navigated, why are you here? Because everyone has talked about it, you all are very courageous. So what do you do to like boost your confidence to take that leap?
Ooh. I think the answer looks really different for different people. Like, I think everyone charges your batteries differently. And I think that I think a lot of it depends on how much you care about like public versus private recognition, and like the degree to which you are the one that's going to fuel yourself kind of continuing versus like you need other people to sort of endorse or push that along. And it's not necessarily an easy dichotomy, but I think that I think Chris said this really well earlier. Like, there's a job that you're being paid to do, right? Like, people don't know how to ask you for, or they would never ask you for. And I think there's probably a bunch of, Colette had shared some earlier, like great coaching tactics for like what gets me excited. I think about like what are the stresses I want to choose, right? It's like going to the gym. Going to the gym is not going to be easy, but I'm choosing to be there, so I'm willing to embrace that stress. And I think a lot of times when I've struggled, especially over the last 5 years of working for myself, I was trying to pay attention to like, am I stressed because this is not a welcome thing that I've chosen, or is this just hard and I need to like suck it up? I cared more that I was doing good work and I was excited, and especially when you're solo, like I don't have a lot of clients being like, here's your performance review on whatever. They're like, if I do good, maybe they hire me again, if that works out time-wise. And I had some people who did, which was great. But I think navigating that question is really a matter of like, do you have a strong internal compass, or can you build that internal compass to figure out what are the things that you want to grapple with?
Awesome, thank you. I love that. Intrinsic motivation all the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions?
Did you end up finishing the PhD?
Oh man, no. In what ended up being pretty poetic, actually, I think like Facebook was kind of the PhD experience I was looking for. Like I got really lucky. The University of Washington HCD program at the time I was there, and I think still now, had this incredible like interdisciplinarity about it, and we were really close to the computer science program, the iSchool in design. And so the people that I saw getting PhDs were tinkering and building and researching and stuff like that. And when I interned at Microsoft Research, it was very similar. Like all the engineers I worked with cared about research. And when I got to Northwestern, there was people that I loved being with and I'm still very close to, but the two people I really wanted to work with were both going up for tenure and didn't have a ton of time. And I also probably was just in the wrong place. But when I left Facebook summer of 2017, which would have been the summer that I effectively graduated my PhD. So I got the PhD that I wanted, but maybe not the one I thought. Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, awesome. Well, big round of applause for Behzad. All right, before we transition to the panel, I just wanted to take a moment to recognize the fact that we've had amazing speakers talk about very different career paths that have all landed themselves in a very like senior IC realm, but look very different day in and day out. The types of work they do, very different. The types of things they're excited by, very different. The types of talks they gave, very different. So I hope that this gives you the courage and the enthusiasm to find your version of what that is and really like make the most of whatever those opportunities are, because there is no one set of senior ICs. It might be like a tranche of people, but the individuals and the work that they do day in and day out looks very different. So with that, we're going to have some amazing conversations next with Celeste and Anshu. I'm going to welcome them up. And we're going to talk about different paths for growing as an IC. All right. Welcome, welcome. So to start off, I'd love for both of you guys to introduce yourselves, talk a bit about essentially your name, the company that you work for, and the job title you currently have, and what excites you most about research. Celeste, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, so some of you might notice that I don't look like Matt Gallivan.
Yeah,
how
sorry,
hard I try.
That. Yeah.
I could not grow a beard fast enough, so sorry about that. Second-rate Matt Gallivan over here.
We hope Matt feels better, but Celeste is very graciously stepping in.
Yeah. So right now, I am the head of research at Robinhood. We have an amazing market and UX research function. I get to lead both of them. I'm very lucky. What were the other questions?
What excites you most about research?
Oh God, maybe everything. That's like a really tricky question. Probably the root of everything is people and problem solving. I don't know. It's endlessly fascinating.
Amazing. Anshu, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Anshu. It's nice to meet you all. I'm a principal researcher at Google. I've been at Google for 7 years as of April, which is crazy, and I'm in consumer shopping.
What excites you most about research?
Also hard to answer, kind of everything. But the way I often talk about research is that we get to be professional learners. We get to learn all day, every day about people and products and the organizations that we're in. And so as all of that changes all of the time, that's just endlessly fascinating. I say that a lot too. And yeah.
I love that, professional learners. That's absolutely true.
Yes.
So to kick us off, I'm curious, we've talked a lot about the path from senior to senior IC and above. I'm curious what you guys think in your own orgs and your own experiences. What's the difference between research at the senior level, the staff level, the principal level, et cetera? And what are some of the defining factors that you've either experienced personally in your growth or, Celeste, from your perspective, like managing a team through that growth? Yeah, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. So for me, I like to think about it in terms of sort of like there are a few defining factors, because like you said earlier, everybody's different, and so the more senior you get, the more the role is about you and what you bring to it than it is, and that's why career frameworks are vague and we all hate them. But it's because it shouldn't be a checklist. I mean, just like, they're terrible. They just solved the problem that we were dealing with the last time we made one, and that's the state of affairs. But so for like a senior researcher, I think about going from senior to staff is like, you're moving from independence to autonomy. You're like, you know what to do when you're independent, but there is a little bit more support. Someone maybe had to give you that idea in the first place. Autonomous is a little bit more self-driving. And then shifting into like a principal researcher, these folks are like proactive or adaptable. Another way I like to think about it is that it's like okay, this is a cheesy metaphor, but if I'm studying planets, let's say, if I'm like an astronomer, I go from senior, where I'm just like really focused on Neptune, to staff, where I'm looking at the solar system and sort of like the landscape and the fabric, all the insights together, and then moving to like a galaxy and trying to point out somewhere else in the universe that we should be looking at entirely. And they have very different flavors.
Awesome.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Well, thank you.
We all answer it in a similar but slightly different way, which is, I think, as you become more senior over time, you're kind of growing on two vectors. I think the first vector is that, usually by like mid to senior level researcher, you're already really good at research, right? You should know your methods, you should have your toolkit, you should know like how to cut corners, how to do that really well. And so the growth, one of the vectors is kind of, you need to augment your skills in all the other things, right? Whether that's collaboration, leadership, influence, business knowledge is so critical. So do you understand the products that you're building? Do you understand the business? Do you understand the gaps? So it's like one vector, and all of that is on top of you as a researcher. And then the other vector is impact. So kind of the solar system thing, going from your local to really like the biggest version of where you can scale your impact, and just doing more and more that impacts at higher order. But the reality as a senior IC is that as you do these things, the system gets more chaotic and more confusing the more senior that you get, right? So it's also this process of experimenting and trying and learning over and over to see, what are different ways that I can show up that can have impact and really augment my skills so I can be better at this job.
Yeah, we heard that a lot today from the folks that spoke too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, Anshu, if you're able to share some of your own career progression. You're now principal researcher, but what were some of the defining moments for you from senior all the way through to where you are now?
Specifically at Google or also pre-Google?
Wherever, yeah. You tell your own story.
Well, I would say, I think my career path, which I love, by the way, when we look back, it feels really linear, but then when we're going through it, it's not at all linear. I think I started out as a researcher, studied research, and then kind of did a little bit of a sidestep and did a lot in startups. So founded a VC incubator, did a lot of building an incubator from scratch, advising startups, was head of product, did just kind of everything you do in startups. And then came into Google. And so came into Google with a bit of like a broader skill set, and then really had a role where I was a variety of things, kind of like either coming in and doing the 0 to 1 or leading a lot of the strategy work, and also doing like a lot of coaching and advising on the team.
Awesome. Can you share a little bit more about how you made some decisions along that path? So, like, what inspired you to go broad first, and have your? It sounded like you had your finger in various different pots there with some startup work, some advisory work. Sounds like some incubator work as well, and then kind of focus more into one specific company.
Yeah, I wish I could say that I had a plan. I did not have a plan. I think all of us as researchers really embody curiosity. And so I think that's really what it was for me, was like I hadn't done startups before. I really wanted to work in VC. As we heard in the previous talk, there's a lot of value in that earliest stage where the space is ambiguous, the problem is ambiguous, the solution is ambiguous, and there's a lot of learning to do in that space. And so I think for me, I've just always looked for and found opportunities where I can learn. And as long as I am still learning in whatever realm that is, then I think it's worthwhile.
Awesome. I think that's such a great tagline. Celeste, can you share a little bit more about your career journey?
Yeah. I agree with you that when you look back, it feels so linear, but at the did not feel that way at all at the time. I was very lucky to be hired as an intern at Oracle. I actually saw my intern manager here yesterday, and I hadn't seen her in 15, 16 years. I nearly cried. She's amazing. You should go find her. But I felt like she took a chance on me. And then my second job, I was there for, a year or so. And then my second job was at Symantec, which is I don't even think they're a company anymore, but it's 20,000 plus people at the time, very intense, very long build cycles. But I can kind of be interested in anything, so encryption was thrilling. It's fun when the people that are supposed to be experts are explaining it to you wrong too in studies. It's very strange. And then I had this moment where somebody referred me to a job at Twitter when Twitter was still very young and much smaller. Well, now it's very small. But I joined before any of that stuff we're not going to talk about. And it was, I got to learn so much in that role. I really went at that point because there were so few people that worked there, and the research team was not that big. I was one of the first 4 or 5 people there in research, and so it was just a blast. I did everything. And then I left to go to Airbnb. I was lucky enough to work with some of the great folks that spoke today, like Chris. I was there for 6 years. My job changed every 5 minutes, and that's why. So I feel like I get itchy brain. That's the phrase I use when you're talking about, am I learning? For me, it's I don't know, I just get this kind of itch. I think Chris called it, I don't know, whatever that cliff of curiosity was, but where you just kind of plummet and you're where's the next wave? And so I kind of gravitate towards trash fire level teams and problems for some reason. My boss at Airbnb used to love to say that I was running towards the trash fire at all times, and I'm just into that, I don't know. But I became a manager. It took a really long time for me to decide to do that for reasons I don't know that are interesting, but then I shifted, and then I decided after some trauma during the pandemic that I had an itchy brain, and so I went to Robinhood, not actually to be the head of research. I did not want that job. And then 3 or 4 months later, that became my job. So that was chill. That's a fun story. That's a fun story too. But it ended up working out. Anyway, that was an itchy brain story, I guess, but that's literally how I've made all of my decisions at this point is, am I sort of bored or not learning anymore, and where is the nearest trash fire? That's how I decide I'm going to do something.
Amazing. And Celeste, can you tell us a little bit about, you have a lot of senior staff, principal folks on your team.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about, from your perspective, like how do you help someone in their career grow from these different milestones?
Oh, man. So a lot of it, I mean, really senior people are such a joy to manage because they may not know what they want, but like you just sort of move stuff out of their way and they just go. And so you can't ask them to do much of anything. They're smarter than you. They should be.
Yeah.
And they know so much more. And so it's like absolutely incredible to manage people like that. However, I would say that the coaching can come in the form of like, hey, Chris, your itchy brain is showing. Maybe we need to put you on something else. Or like, let me help you figure out what it is you want next, even if it's not research. I also think people get stuck in this mindset of like, well, I'm really good at this one thing, even though I may not actually enjoy doing it. And so I think that like moving away from just because you enjoy something or just because you're good at something doesn't mean you have to keep doing it for work. And people will toss you that unless you speak up. So we end up talking a lot about that kind of thing. But yeah, for the most part, funneling resources and opportunity and just putting your hands up and backing away is an absolute joy.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I love that point, though, of like really keeping people honest about the type of work they're most excited to do.
Yeah.
So I totally agree that I think, especially at the senior level or senior plus level, that like the intersection of being really good at something and having so much hunger and drive to do that thing well is just unstoppable at that point.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, Anji, you mentioned a really interesting like bifurcation. We talked a little bit about craft and being really good at your skill set, and also impact, like being able to drive product or business decisions forward based on your work. I think I'm curious to understand from both your perspectives, what do you think the difference is between like call it entry level, senior, and principal? We'll just take those three jumping points. And what is the difference in craft and impact at each of those levels? Maybe, Anji, you can kick us off.
I'm thinking. But actually, before I answer, I wanted to add on to the career and how things are going. And oftentimes what will happen is after 5 minutes or 10 minutes, I'll ask them, do you enjoy your job?
Yeah.
Are you, and is there some kernel of something that you're doing that you feel is worthwhile? Because the job and, especially the climate of tech, that joy, like the value, like you're like, yes, I'm here for the right reason, then that's really hard. And so I've actually said that a lot, is like to have them reflect on like, can you find something in here that you're like excited about?
And everyone will notice too.
Yeah.
If you are not feeling it,
yeah,
it's not hard to know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even if you think you're being subtle.
Yeah. You're not being subtle.
Yeah. And then I'm going to punt my answer. You go first, because I'm.
Oh no. Fine. Okay, so I was actually talking to Matt about this. Poor guy, he's sick. But he was telling me that he feels like confidence is, and like being comfortable in your own skin. And then Heather actually said something similar later on. It's so much of like transitioning is just like figuring out sort of, I don't know, I feel like where the rules are and then how to like adapt to that. However, I think there's also like, we work a lot around judgment and like developing judgment. Judgment is not something that I think everyone inherently has. And sure, you have probably excellent judgment in certain aspects of your life. But judgment in like a business context or beyond a research, you have excellent research judgment, I promise. But like judgment about when to share the finding, when to hold it back because maybe it's not ready, things like that. I think I'm sorry, the question was around like transitioning from senior to staff to principal, and like, okay, so judgment and then business context and things like that are just insanely helpful. I think the scope of the impact starts to change quite a bit too. It goes from changing how a button or a design looks, I'm being really broad strokes here, but to like changing maybe the words people are using, or like the roadmap or the strategy, cross team if you're lucky, to principle feels more like, okay, defining what problems the business even considers the right ones to solve. And being that like trusted, influential person. So like you go from being a researcher, like you're behind your sort of research lens to you're out in front of your research lens, and it's backing the things you're saying and doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a huge component of like critical thinking in there too.
Yeah.
Where like you can stay at like a mid-level researcher if all you do is like constantly answer your PM's questions.
Yeah.
Like that's a great way to stay at like a mid-level research role.
Yeah.
I think the way to grow beyond that is saying, hey, wait a second, are we even asking the right questions? Or like, what about that thing over there that like kind of connects to the thing we care about? And like, if we put them together, that might actually be bigger than the opportunity we have currently in front of us.
Yeah, it's sort of like fabric, where there's like all the different inputs, and then you're seeing the forest instead of the trees all of a sudden.
Yeah, absolutely. And like having the critical thought or the judgment, as you mentioned, to say like, actually, this isn't the right problem. We need to be asking these types of questions and understanding these types of problems to really like dig in to like the meaty things that might not be coming your way directly.
Yeah, I love that. That's so true. And I think, you know, as you expand, I think that scope and that influence of like where is your sphere of influence, and then also what that implies is that you also need to know a lot more about the market and about your business and about like what's your team currently thinking, what are your leaders currently thinking, what are some assumptions maybe that they have that you think are wrong, that you can start to shift. And so I think as you kind of do that sphere of influence, and then the judgment is so key. I love that, because it's also about like what is the thing that is like really critical that's going to help shift the whole company or the whole organization in a way that is meaningful, that's going to like drive our strategy. And so finding those things, finding the questions to ask that nobody's asking, figuring out a way then to, when you get the insights, how do I frame it also in a way that people can hear?
Yeah.
That there's a whole art in the framing, right? And how do you tell the story, and how do you speak to executives in a way that they will actually listen? That's a whole other skill set in itself that I am also still learning. And how do you do that? And timing plays such a critical role too. I think we often forget that you can have amazing research, but if the timing isn't right, there's some luck and some strategy in timing.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. We have about 15 minutes left, so I'd love to open it up to any audience questions that we have.
Sorry, I was looking for you. Thanks so much for this panel. This was really educational. My name's Maria, and I was really struck by this kind of trajectory that you're mapping out in terms of growth in skills along a number of different domains or vectors. And one of the things that I was interested in hearing your perspective on is whether or not it's just a matter of reps. So is it just increased kind of doing it over and over again? Is that the best way to kind of move along this trajectory? Or is there an inflection point? So in other words, are there kind of catalysts for growth along this trajectory? You know, pick a domain. You have so many that you've described. Yeah, I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, I can answer that. I think it is reps, definitely. And I think it's also finding, like, you need to be proactive about learning those other skills. You need to be proactive about learning about the business. You know, like every researcher, I think, comes to the table with a specific like magic sauce, and you can kind of find your like other role that you can be close to. So for me, that's product, and I've been head of product. I've done a lot of product stuff, and so for me, being very close to product makes sense. But there are other researchers that might be really close to design or really close to engineering, and so you kind of find what's like your magic space, and then you grow into that role, almost, right? And so that can happen through you being proactive and learning. It can be you being taking on roles like startups where you get to just do the things and you learn so much by just doing it yourself. A lot of empathy also for people in those jobs. And it also can come through mentors and through people that you identify that you're like, hey, you're a really strong business leader. I would love to hear more. Like, let's like almost interview them and learn from their perspective. I think I've done a lot of that as well. And I find people who can be part of my bench that are widely outside of research so that I can get that kind of broader perspective and really bring it into everything that I do.
One of the things I'm hearing in what you're saying is there's like an intentionality. So it's, and that for me is the distinction between sort of like hockey stick style growth in an area versus that slog of like, I just got to get my reps in. The intentionality is really important for the squishier stuff too. So things like judgment and influence, you're rolling the boulder up that hill forever. That never stops. It's gonna crush you on the way down, and then you're gonna get right back up and do it over again. And so, but I've seen people start to like hone in and focus, and it changes so much when you're looking through that lens of like, well, how would can I learn from others' scar tissue in terms of judgment right now? I like to say that like I learn through courtside seats. Like I like to interview execs after I watch them bomb and stuff like that and be like, what was going through your mind when that happened? And or like, wow, what did you do? Are you okay? How did you think to say that? And it's like taught me a lot about how not to do that, or like what sort of sampling of my own can I take from that and use that's authentic to me. So yeah, I don't think there's there's also seasons, right? You're not gonna get to practice all the time some of this stuff unless you're having exposure to moments when you can use it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's also something too, like by the time you hit senior, you should have a sense of what your secret sauce is.
Oh yeah.
And say like, this is what I'm known for. I think I have like 8 folks who are senior staff, et cetera, on my team.
Yeah.
And I can tell you right now, one sentence, what each of their like taglines are, or like what each of their thing is, where I'm like, oh, you are phenomenal at this. So when a problem looks like this, or when we need this type of thing, like this is where I want you to play, and like you'll shine in that space. So I think for me also part of the reps piece is like, do you know what that thing is for yourself? And have you built up a reputation with that, either within your team or within your organization, such that you have the opportunity to continue building those reps because that's like what you're excited about, that's what you're known for, and that's what you're like phenomenal at. So I think there is a component of reps there, and it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, because the more you put yourself out there for the things you really like, the more you'll get called on to do those things, and probably at like a higher and higher level as well.
Thank you both. So you talked about as you become more senior, chaos ensues. You talked about expanding horizons of what can be considered. You talked about having the autonomy and the proactivity of being able to expand the research questions that could be asked. So the world's getting bigger. We only have so much time. How does one manage their eyes are too big for the plate that's in front of them and the work that can be done?
You want to go first? I took the last one.
Yeah, harsh but fair. Okay. So, it's such a good question. I think that this is like a slight cop-out, but I've found that you'll always end up making space for the things that you're like really excited about that are a step beyond. Sometimes that looks like 1 hour a week, but just setting aside something for this sort of like broader stuff you're thinking about. But meeting the moment is something that comes up a lot. If you're not satisfying, to use your metaphor of food, like if your teams aren't satisfied, they're gonna be hungry, they're gonna be burning down your house for more. And so you have to make sure that you're sort of sating what's in front of the people in front of you, and then making sure that back here you're producing something long term. It's really tricky to do that, and there are a lot of people in this room that do it really, really well. It's different for everybody. But yeah.
I would add, I just had a meeting this morning where we were talking about saying no. I say no a lot. I say no a lot. Yeah, and it's hard. You have to learn to figure out like what are the things to say no to, and it will be different based on every organization that you're in. But I think saying no, especially as a senior IC, is so important because you need to, like the space you have is precious to work on really hard things, and if you don't have enough space, you can't do those things. So that I think is really critical. And then I think within whatever it is on your plate for your core team where you're delivering work, there is always opportunity to expand. You know, and I think we talked about being proactive. Here's the thing they asked for, and then you're gonna like answer this thing and this thing and this thing and this thing, right? And then that altitude that you can maybe find is what is gonna be exciting for you potentially. So I think you can always be flexible and find a way to do both.
Yeah, it's so much broader than like just a usability test if you're thinking about like what nugget can I add in here to get it like a long-term picture, things like that.
Yeah. I think this is also a great conversation to have with your manager and say like, hey, these are the things that are on my plate, but I also see this amazing thing. Help me prioritize, help me find the time to move the needle here if we both agree that this is important, and you can potentially problem solve that together, and maybe that means saying no, to your point around some of the things that were on your plate and adding them in. Maybe that means holding off on that one exciting thing until the moment is right in 2 quarters and then tackling it. So I think you should be asking your manager that question on a very regular basis. Because 1, it makes sure you are working on the highest priority things, and 2, it makes sure you are really aligned with the type of work that you want to do, and hopefully that's more fulfilling, prevents you from burning out, just churning out a lot of research that maybe isn't as personally fulfilling.
Such a good manager, Colette.
I care a lot about this space, if that's not apparent from today. Yeah.
Hi, thank you for sharing all of the good insights. I have a question. I think as researchers, we are trained or learned, and we're really good at trying to find others to learn from, to trying to find mentors. But I was wondering, as you progress in your career, as you become a more senior IC, when do you feel like you need to find someone to mentor for, or find a mentee to start practicing your mentorship? And that's my first question. And second follow-up question is, as a senior IC and as a manager, what are some of different tips on mentoring different levels of people?
That's a good question. I admit that I don't think I've explicitly looked for mentees. Mentees find me. And they can come in all different levels and, parts of the organization. And I think mentee relationships are amazing, right? Because the mentorship really goes both ways. And, like I'm learning so much from them and they're learning so much from me. And I think it really depends on the 2 people in that dynamic and like what are the goals? Like, what do you want to talk about? Like, what's most helpful for both people? And often the junior folks on my team, right, they are way more on top of all the newest tools than I am. And I so appreciate it, and they think about the world really differently than I do as well. What was the second part of your question?
What are some tips, and what do you think about if there are differences on mentoring different levels?
Yeah, okay. So differences, mentoring different levels.
I don't really think about it as much about different levels, but more I think like what the question is, like, and then where somebody is in their journey, right? So if you want to talk about career and you're, junior versus you're really senior, right? Obviously, we'll talk about really different things. Celeste, do you have an answer to that?
I don't think I've ever sought out like a mentee either, but I also don't know that there's so many moments where I haven't like explicitly defined that relationship, and I think that's part of what's awkward is most people aren't like, can you mentor me, or can you be my mentee? And so there are probably mentors of mine who have no idea that I think of them that way, because there wasn't like an express dialogue about it. But I think that when you start showing up and like doing things well, people gravitate into your orbit just as you grow. It's like a sort of a natural part of working with other people. And then the second part was about like mentorship at different levels. To me, mentorship is mostly about like asking questions, and like asking good questions, which like everyone in this room is so good at. And so it doesn't matter. what level you are. But I do think that the questions do start to change, kind of like Behzad's talk about like, why are you here, can evolve over time. And then, but then sometimes you hit like 20 years of career and you're like, wait, what am I doing? What's going on? And so like sometimes you have to revisit old questions too. But yeah, it's really, really personal and dependent.
Yeah, I think it's also like what you become known for. So I think kind of to your point, like I've also never sought out anyone to mentor in particular, but people will come to me because I love mixed methods work. I love helping people grow in their careers. And like, if you want to talk to me about cooking, I'm definitely not the person to come to for that. But if you want to talk about those two topics, like I'm absolutely the right person. So I think it's a little bit of like kind of that self-fulfilling prophecy idea again, where like the more you put yourself out there and do that type of work internally and share it with others, the more people are going to come to you and say, hey, I want to run a project just like that. How do I do it? Or I want to have that type of impact. How do I do it? So I think a lot of it is just like leading by example. And I think that's when you know you're ready for mentorship, is you've done something, you're really excited about it, and you want to share that with other people. And if that's the case, then like have at it. But if you're just trying to like coach someone for the sake of coaching, I'd politely ask you to not.
Yeah,
I think.
It's not a box to check.
Yeah.
It's that confidence and comfort in your own skin.
Yeah, absolutely. And like having the experience of seeing the same problem in 20 different dimensions, such that when someone comes to you with a question of it in one dimension, you've probably seen that or some flavor of that to actually be able to help them see around the corner that they currently can't see around. But if you haven't seen that type of problem before, you might be able to help like be a sounding board for them, but you might not necessarily be able to guide them like away from true experience, I'd say. So yeah, I agree. I think the levels of the questions change, the types of impacts change, the challenges change. Absolutely. I think we have time for maybe one last question, if anyone has any.
Hi, my name is Megan. Thank you so much. One of the ways that I have grown the most in my craft and career is through feedback from my teammates. And I'm curious if there are any practices or rituals that you have either introduced or observed that help cultivate a really healthy feedback culture for your teams.
I'm obsessed with this question. I don't want a TED Talk, so you should probably go first.
Okay. Well, I feel like nothing earth-shattering, to be honest. I think a lot of just making sure that the team is talking, is communicating. Like at Google, we have almost like too many ways to communicate. So is it email, or is it ping, or is it, all the things. But, I think just setting a foundation of communication, sharing work. We have like an alignment process where any upcoming work is shared, so there's visibility. We know who should be involved. We know that like where things should be in collaboration. If there's a deck that's going to be going out to executives, there's a review process. So it's kind of, I think, just like built into the way that we do things. And then feedback naturally comes from that, but I think the collaboration and the transparency is the precursor to it.
Yeah, we should probably talk after this, because I'm never going to stop talking about this. I feel so strongly about this, and I think it starts with the person leading the team. Mm-hmm. So you have to make it safe to receive feedback and respond to it. You also have to make it safe to like not have your feedback fully baked. There's a lot in there, and I think so the year was 2017. And I decided that I was going to get really good at feedback. I was like, I'm gonna do this all the time. And so once a week, I would try to think like, okay, what's like a piece of feedback I can give someone? And how do I, is there an anatomy of the way of giving this feedback that's gonna be helpful? I researched the shit out of it, because research, and just endlessly went to town. I did spectacularly horribly for a while, by the way. It's really hard. But not only did I get pretty good at it by practicing it like crazy, I also watched other people practice it back with me because I was modeling the behavior I wanted. Because especially as you ascend in levels, regardless of whether or not you're a manager, people kind of stop giving you feedback. There's like implied power hierarchy and things like that, but you have to, like, so me giving feedback and asking for feedback is a huge part of perpetuating the cycle of getting it. The last thing I'll say about this, and again, I will go on forever, I'm so sorry, is that like, you have to, oh God, did it just leave my brain? It's gone forever. It's gone. You'll never know. Cliffhanger. Okay, sorry, I've arrived. You have to be specific about the feedback you're looking for. So like, do you have any feedback for me is like the worst question. And we all do it because we don't know what else to say. But like, the best thing to do is, I'm really trying to work on my design taste, or I'm really trying to work on my communication, specifically like my written communication. You have exposure to that. Can you give me feedback about it? Like, that's much more helpful than asking someone to conjure some nonsense that they like had 2 seconds to think about. Like, do you have any feedback? But we all do it. Like, we all do it. Don't go home and feel bad about this. But it's so much better when you can like be really targeted about what you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then other juice comes out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Also very good for those mentor conversations.
Yes.
Please be
Yeah.
specific.
Yes.
Really good point.
Yeah.
Really good point. I'll put a cap on the feedback piece. I also, maybe next year we should give a talk at Learners about feedback, because clearly both of us are very excited about this topic. Oh yeah, Alec greenlit it, so we've signed up. We're doing this for next year. I have a process that I do with my team, and that I actually encourage my team to do with any relationship they find either difficult or one that they think they could learn a lot from, like it's working really well and they want to understand like why that's working well. It's called 2x2 feedback. It probably should be 2x2x2, but basically what it is it's bidirectional feedback. So let's say, Celeste, you and I are giving 2x2 feedback. I'd come prepared and I'd say, hey Celeste, in terms of like our working together, I think here are 2 things you're doing really, really well.
Oh, thank you.
A and B. And I think there are 2 things I think you can really improve on, C and D. I think 2 things I could really improve on are, I'm going to lose track of the alphabet if I keep going here, so A and B. And I think 2 things I could really improve on in terms of our relationship are C and D.
Oh, I like that.
And then you say the same back to me. So I think what I really like about this is I do this with my people who report to me directly. I do it with my boss. I do it with my cross-functional partners. And I think what it really does is it destigmatizes feedback. Why? Both people have a say in the conversation. It's not me being like, hey, you need to work on this. It's like, hey, we are not operating as best as we could, but we both are culpable in that. So let's come to the table and let's like write down really clearly 2 things you think the other person is doing well. Even if you are not working well with that person, there is something they are doing well in their job. That is why they are still employed. And recognizing that, taking a moment to like actually think about that and like write it down and acknowledge them for that, the more specific, the better. Amazing. There are probably some things that anyone could improve on. Even if it's the rock star on your team, that's phenomenal. There are things they can improve on, for sure. The more specific, the better. And then hearing that with an open heart, an open mind, I cannot tell you how many like relationships that's changed in terms of like tricky situations that have just been like diffused. And in terms of growth and saying like, hey, I'm sharing this feedback with you, even if it's hard to hear, because I care about your career and I care about your growth. And for you to get to the next level, this is what really needs to happen. So anyways, my TED Talk is now over on feedback. But maybe we can talk more about this to prep for our talk next year. Awesome. Well, on that note, thank you very much to amazing panelists. Amazing women and amazing careers, so thank you very much for sharing your advice. Lastly, thank you all for coming today. I think this has been a phenomenal morning. I personally have learned a lot from a lot of you. And huge thank you to Alec, Maggie, and the whole Learners team for making Research Week even possible. Woo! Very big thank you. All right, and thankfully Research Week doesn't end here. So please stick around for the afternoon. Heather has a phenomenal program. So if you want to learn more about AI and research, stick around.
UX researchers are moving faster and smarter with Alida. Reach real users at scale and capture insights fast enough to drive real decisions. We're talking 5 times faster recruitment and insights that actually influence action by blending qual and quant and embedding research at every step of innovation. Alida, where human-centered UX drives real business impact. Join us for Demo Day and see how Alida can elevate your research.